Hi, and welcome to On the Same Page, where for once we are on the same page. I'm Neko from the YouTube channel MAK_Neko, where I produce a series of video game, music, covers and remixes, short animated sequence and films, and just generally talk about media I enjoy or otherwise.
And I'm Brenton. I'm passionate about storytelling, game design, sitcoms and nostalgia.
We'll be talking about the latest Doctor Who episode, Revolution of the Daleks.
Yeah, it's very unique. We're on the same page for once because we think this is garbage.
Well, that's, I think, the interesting part, is I actually enjoyed this, but I'm still like, this is the best we have.
I disagree with that, but go on.
No, sorry, not necessarily like the best we have, but like, this show at this current time feels like such a placeholder. It feels like when I watch like the 6th and 7th Doctor, and I'm like, there are parts of this I like, but it is very clear the show is on its way to being cancelled. It just feels like we are just padding time.
See, I would agree that it's padding time if it wasn't so destructive. Like, I get that this show is focused on not being something you would watch in a continuous run. Like, you wouldn't start from William Hartnell and then binge straight through to Jodie Whittaker. That is so unreasonable for a fan to do that. Of course, you're going to have these moments where it's like, we're going to do this thing. If it affects something that came before, we take it in stride. But this Timeless Child thing rewrites 60 years of the show that I don't think it had to. This isn't placeholder. I'm struggling to... Season 7 is placeholder. That's like Doctor Who on cruise control. Because it doesn't do anything until the very end.
That's true.
But it's not something that... The reveal of the War Doctor, it doesn't destroy the show. It instead tries to connect things.
Yeah, but it doesn't really impact anything,
That's not what we're getting with Chibnall. We're getting someone who has ideas, believes the show has a future with these ideas.
Yeah. I guess, like, when I say placeholder, I mean, like, tone-wise. Like, they're not... But I agree with you, the Timeless Child thing really shifts that. Like, season 11 was probably more the placeholder, like, nothing changed.
Oh, yeah, that's a better example than 7.
Yeah, well, 7's the same way. Like, I guess it's just that sense of, like, season 11 didn't really contribute much. But then season 12 came across and was like, oh, no, we need to force change.
It contributed too much.
And then was suddenly like, we have the Master, we have the Cybermen, we have everything you love from the Davies era is back. We're even going to blow up Gallifrey again. It's so much change.
Jadoon.
And it's like, it does feel like the show knows it's on the way out. And he's like, but here's all the cool fan servicey stuff. And we gotta open the show up, make it new again. So we're gonna undo all the foundational stuff so we can do something new. That's about the only thing keeping the show from just staling into the ground. And yet, it's so drastic that it's making it worse.
Yeah.
I feel like with this, because it plays almost like a sequel of Resolution, I don't remember Resolution much, but I'm suddenly like, oh, this kind of feels like season 11 mattered a little bit. Like, I feel some progression now. There was no foundation to begin with. It felt like we went backwards, but in a way that made me go, oh yeah, the show used to be safer and without the Timeless Child thing. That was nice. I don't know. It's actually got me now thinking which is better, season 11 or 12. But I ultimately just go, that shouldn't be the debate.
It shouldn't be the debate because the answer is 11, because 11 has... it's not good, but it's like you can... It's like McDonald's. McDonald's isn't good for anyone, but you can stomach it.
Yeah.
Because if we're ignoring the Timeless Child, the Destruction of Gallifrey, the shitty Master sequel, we then have to deal with Orphan 55. We have to deal with Praxius. We have to deal with... what was the other thing? There was another...
Yeah, Tesla and whatnot. I genuinely forgot those existed because I just remembered the choppy plot episodes.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, episode 1 is the Master, episode 5 is Ruth. These don't seem to be connected and they're so far apart. Every season had that to an extent. Like, they had these episodic cutaway episodes. But you at least felt like Harold Saxon,
was Bad Wolf.
even though they just kept saying it, it was the same thing being built. So you're like, oh, that must be connected in some way. Whereas with this, it's like, not until episode 12 did I see how any of that was going to come together.
Yeah.
And then when it did, it was just, oh, the Master kills the Cyberman and Ruth is just also there. Timeless Child. And I was like, wait, what? Yeah, remember in season 11 we mentioned it once. Oh, okay. Cool.
That's kind of been the crazy thing going back and watching series 11. I wish I had more time and not a massive headache afterwards that I could have watched series 12, just so I would be able to approach this episode with an itemized list of things that it needs to do in order to feel.
Yeah. I certainly, like, when I first watched Revolution of the Daleks, I was ready to hate it. Like, I went in so mad because I was like, season 12 so threw me off. Like, after the Ruth thing, I didn't trust the show to pay off or commit to anything. So I think the fact that they addressed it in a way that had me go, okay, at least they're committing to the Timeless Child thing. Not great, but after we had, like, say, Last Jedi and then, completely backtracking, the movie got so bogged down in that. I was like, if you're gonna do something this drastic, at least commit to it. Maybe it'll be an entertaining train wreck, and then we can move on. If you start retconning it every time you make a big plot reveal, I'm never gonna trust any of your plot reveals. You're just going to lose all credibility, so at least do it.
The issue with saying they're at least somewhat committing to it is they're really not, though.
Yeah.
At the moment, they've only done the thing, and now in Revolution of the Daleks gone, hey, I'm angry about this thing, or I don't know who I am. So it's like, are they going to approach that in series 13?
Yeah.
I don't know. Thanks to COVID, there's less episodes again.
Well, that's true, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's where I'm sitting in a little nice safety bubble where I'm like, I hated season 11 for being so run-of-the-mill that I was bored and frustrated with I remember getting to Rosa and being like, this is fine. I mean, Rosa was quite good, and then it just, like, came crashing down. That I was like, wait a second, Rosa's great, but that's because the story of Rosa is great. You could just copy and paste that in, and it would be a decent story. We haven't gotten to know any of these characters, and I just suddenly imploded from, I'm enjoying this enough, to, no, I hate this. And it was such a flip that the rest of the season was just like, yeah, they still haven't established. Like, I remember, like you were saying, the 6th episode with the Punjab thing. Like, that was, again, quite nice. Like, the historical angle has been decent, but I just wasn't getting any deep progression, and we were like 6 episodes in. So it is kind of this bubble of, like, series 11 was annoyingly stale. And I was like, all right, I hope they learn from that and do something more. I started appreciating Moffat's, like, worser episodes because I was like, at least he took risks.
Yeah, at least he's doing something.
Yeah, but then season 12 came across and was like, we're bringing the Master back. And I was like, okay, this is more entertaining. Like, cool. I was increasingly back on board. And then we got the Ruth thing, and I was like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Wait, there's 10 episodes? We're only 5, we're halfway. No, this isn't gonna pay off.
And we've done nothing to establish this mystery, yeah.
I knew people were enjoying it, and were like, oh, I can't wait to see where this goes. And I was like, I don't trust the show now. But there was...
You expect it to go anywhere?
Yeah, there was certainly an angle, though, where I appreciated that season 12 was getting back into stuff that connected it. Like when we had Smith and people were saying, where's all Davies monsters? Why don't you bring anything back? It was kind of that same feeling of like, please don't just go into your own bubble of nothing. You've got no good monsters to show us so far. So, like, at least, have a Dalek story. They're a bit stale too, but do something cool with it. So I was appreciating that we had a new master, the Cybermen came back, etc. And I was thinking that season 12 to me was better than season 11 for just being more.
Things that we recognize, but on top of, it's not like they only did Cyberman stories and Master stories.
Yeah.
They still had their shitty Praxeus and...
Yeah, that's the thing though. We had Orphan 55, and that was when I went, okay, episode 3 again. You were getting me back on board, but why is it that episode 3 always makes me realize we're going nowhere?
I like that everyone agrees Orphan 55 is terrible. Like,
yeah.
I've not heard anyone say, yeah, but people like it though.
I reckon it's because of that ending. Like, if it just ended a bit more subtly, people might have been like, yeah, environmental themes, whatever. But that ending where the Doctor basically says to the audience, like, take care of the planet, global warming, I think that just lost a lot of people.
You can have your do good for the planet message. You can be Captain Planet and make sense. Or not even make sense, but just feel natural.
Yeah, I think Orphan 55, is that the one where the lady's like, where's Benny?
Yep.
Gotta find Benny, and she just won't shut up about Benny.
Had Jay from In-Betweeners.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Though he had weird green hair.
Yeah,
and he wasn't funny.
That one was like, I think, just noticeably bad from beginning to end. I think that's the trick though, with stuff like Revolution of the Daleks. The fact that it leans back on resolution, which then makes me think back and go, oh yeah, Graham and Ryan had a conflict in season 11 that was at least sort of touched on. Not great, only built on maybe 3 episodes tops. But there was something, and they clearly had some kind of resolve. And that's why season 12, I was feeling like Graham and Ryan were done, and they were still there. I think, I liked season 12 better for the monsters because it was all bringing stuff back. But companions-wise, it was so much worse. Like, even the finale, we're all just standing around. There's certainly an element to this where I'm suddenly backtracking and being like, because Timeless Child wrecked so much of what was building up in season 12, and I knew it was coming. I knew that Ruth couldn't possibly have a good explanation. I think I'm now backtracking and going, this episode feels like a direct sequel to Resolution, and Resolution had Graham and Ryan make up, and like he met his dad, so it just feels like this episode went, and then they went home happily ever after. And I'm like, that should have been the next episode. I'm glad they addressed the Timeless Child thing, but I think the fact that they were able to acknowledge it without having to actually add to it, if this episode had been more Timeless Child shenanigans, I would have been like, oh god, it's getting worse. But because they were like, here's some emotional acknowledgement, like they didn't just go, yeah, Timeless Child, we'll get to that. They had a few nice emotional scenes, which I appreciated, and then that resolved Ryan and Graham's thing and they left the show. So I think I'm in that safety bubble of going, the end. I don't have to put up with this anymore. They're done. That's the way it should have ended, but it should have been a season ago. I can pretend this happened a season ago. And then we'll get to the Timeless Child stuff and I'll be like, oh no, season 13's so bad.
What I find very funny about you saying, oh, this is like the sequel to Resolution, it makes you think back to Resolution and go like, oh, maybe it's going somewhere. It's bizarre to me how much Revolution of the Dalek applies the handbrake to the plot just to have those character things. So it's a time machine. We have never gotten the impression that it takes 4 minutes for the time machine to get from, where is it, Sheffield to Osaka.
Yeah.
Like, it's very weird that they had to specify, we've got 4 minutes on this journey, and that gives us just enough time to have this emotional moment.
Yeah, that's the sort of thing I didn't think of till afterwards, that I was like, wait a second, they shouldn't be having these conversations because of the plot. And also because the Mr. Big is still in the room. Like, I guess they just left him with Graham? Yeah, no, that's the thing. Graham's not there either. There is such a bizarre thing to this episode, and I think that's where I'm like, when I say I liked it, I am adamant that what I mean is I liked the heart-to-heart scene between Yaz and Jack, and that kept me going for most of the rest of the episode. I hated the opening with the guy going to get coffee for like... Oh, that was so terrible. He just goes to a random place and it just happens to be the one that gets him killed. And it feels like a student film to me, and I realize it's because of how Australian outback it feels. Like there's just a lot of trees and he's in the middle of nowhere and he's getting a coffee from one of those mobile things. The shitty places, yeah. This feels like I'm aware someone's filming this. I'm always aware people are like doing certain shots and that, but I'm usually focused on what the camera's focused on or what the director was trying to do. I'm never just like someone ran out of money and just had to grab their camera from home and went outside and just filmed their local park. That's what it feels like. I'm like, this scene has no point other than you had to film something for your student class. So you went out with your friends and shot something outside. And I'm like, look, a guy getting coffee. And then something happens to him. It's very dramatic. I feel like that's what a lot of student films are like. They just have to shoot on a cheap location and nothing happens because they're so excited to film and script. And then you remember Chris Chibnall, showrunner for Broadchurch, writer of past Doctor Who episodes. Like this is a person with, and I'm using air quotes here, even though no one can see me, but like, he's got experience as a writer, and he wrote this? Yeah. Yeah, this feels like slapped together.
Yes. Which is weird because the production for this, I was watching the Council of Geeks video, and I'm going to trust them on this. But they were talking about how production for this episode started before the COVID lockdowns in March. So it's like, between then and now that we have it, it's like it didn't go through any final checks to see if this made any sense.
Yeah.
Like, they had time, is all I'm really gonna say. They had time to figure out how to achieve this. So it's very depressing that this is how they achieve it.
I think that's the difference too, is like, I agree with you. On the one hand, they had time to neaten this up, and there's a billion things that, like, even on a first watch, I'd just be like, why didn't anyone give notes about this? On the other hand, I guess because of the pandemic, there wasn't really much opportunity to go back and fix it, so they just had what they had. Like, editing should be able to save some of this. There's certain things that I'm just like, you could, again, the coffee thing, I feel like you could just cut. Just cut to him with the coffee. I suppose you had to show the lady gives it to him and he gets captured, but it's like, do we need any of that? Just show he's meant to take it back to the thing. Just say he's taking it back to the rich guy.
Yeah.
Like, you don't, there's so much fluff here.
It's very interesting because episode 4 of series 11, the spider episode, has Mr. Big. One of his sub companies is waste disposal. Like, this could just be another operation of his, and it just happens to be the one that gets him a Dalek.
Yeah.
Even though I hate that.
Yeah, it clearly shows that they're worried people haven't seen the episodes, because, like, the very hand-wavy way that she's like, oh, I guess that toxic spell really did a number on you. Is like, oh, please don't mention that. I felt even that. It felt like they were separate. There was a feeling to me, it was always just the one person on screen, and the way it kept cutting back and forth felt very choppy, very... You say a thing now, you say a thing now, you say a thing now. Like they were reading their lines without each other there. I don't know if you got that feeling, but...
I could believe that. Like, the only real two things I think are in this episode is when Yaz shoves the doctor and when Ryan falls off his bike.
Yeah.
Like, those are the only two things I can say, yes, they were definitely there together.
Yeah.
They certainly shared a scene.
Well, I guess that's like you said, though, that if this was filmed before the pandemic, there'd be no reason for that. So I was wondering about that.
I'm not necessarily saying it was filmed before the pandemic, but like it was definitely in production before then. Because Series 12 finished production last year. So they would have been working on this January, I guess.
So were the police riots before or after the pandemic?
Yeah, that has to have been baked into the script and shot sometime maybe in March at the earliest is what I'll say, because it's like,
okay, because that's the part that felt, it was, yeah, those three, the Prime Minister, Mr. Big, and the other guy, those three felt like they weren't together, and the people down there some of them are wearing masks. So I don't know, but like that's the thing, it feels like such an allegory that I'm like, yep, okay.
I see, Chibnall, you wrote this sometime in late, what was it, August?
I think this is where like I'm actively ignoring all of that. Like it really is to me. I was watching this going, okay, we got the Dalek and big rich evil guys gonna take the Daleks. Yep, cool, we get it. I guess I was still mad at the Timeless Child things. I came into this like, I promised myself I wasn't even going to bother watching this because I just gave up on assuming they were going to commit to anything or pay off anything properly or give us any foundation. But when I went into this and watched the first opening bit, it wasn't until the Doctor came back and Yaz was that upset that I was like, oh, we actually have some emotional drama. Like the gang is not just getting along all the time.
Where did this come from? Not in my Doctor Who.
So I think I got excited that for once something seemed to matter, and then because they didn't have to elaborate on the parts that I hated, I was just like, cool, I can pretend this is all, I can watch this in isolation. the pandemic gave us enough time that I can kind of pretend season 12 mostly didn't happen and that season 13 hasn't happened yet. So I was going to be like, that's nice that Yaz has some personal stakes in the matter now. That's a step up. The rest of it's awful. I don't know. It really is just that. I just started enjoying that Jack and Yaz, to me, had any kind of dynamic. I think especially because when Whittaker and Jack were on screen and they were breaking out of the prison, I was like, this looks so CGI'd. This looks like two people in a green screen being like, pretend to run.
Oh, the hamster ball.
And I was like, I don't know what to fault here, but this does not feel like the Doctor and Jack interacting. Again, doesn't feel like they're on screen together.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's an issue though of we haven't seen the Doctor with Jack in what is it, like 11 years?
In 3 generations.
3, 1, 2. Yeah.
Yeah, so it'd be Whittaker, Capaldi, Smith.
Yeah, I was confused where we were counting from for a second, but like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like we just haven't seen them together to know what their dynamic would be now.
Yeah.
But it's also like she doesn't have a personality really that makes me go, this relationship will be interesting or this relationship will be interesting. It's just, of course they're gonna be best friends.
Yeah.
She's best friends with everyone.
And I think that's the thing. The fact that Yaz was like, I'm actually upset.
The Doctor didn't really pick up on the whole they're upset. It's like,
oh no, not the Doctor. It was between Yaz and Jack. Jack was calling Yaz out for the way she felt. Then Ryan was calling the Doctor out for the way she felt. And I was like, after 2 seasons of everyone gets along, no one has any conflict, I was just like, finally, a heart-to-heart about something. The plot around it makes absolutely no sense. But just in isolation, I was like, oh, good. Whether that really saves the episode, I don't know.
No, it doesn't.
I think it is just, I was so relieved for how mad I was going in that I think it just helped. It's evident that even during those conversations, Graham was nowhere to be seen, and I was like, that's actually a benefit, because you have the one-on-one cutting back and forth between Ryan and the Doctor and Yaz and Jack, and the fact that we don't also have to cut to Graham and Mr. Big saves time. It prevents it from being cluttered.
Right.
Which it usually is. I don't know, it made it small scale enough that I could ignore the rubbish around it. I could ignore the other seasons and just be like, I feel like I'm actually getting to know what the characters stand for, which is something. It's small morsels, but it's something.
I don't know if I can agree. At best, I can be like, yeah, sure, I'm glad you felt that way. But I don't think anything has been supported. My favorite scene of the entirety of Jodie's run so far has been after Grace's funeral when Ryan's up on the hill and he's on his bike.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, that's what life is. It's riding a bike, falling down, and then just getting back up on it.
Yeah, it's...
And like, that's a very beautiful scene to me. The fact that they have that be the final thing in this episode to sort of send off Ryan and Graham, even that doesn't save the episode for me because they didn't earn it in this moment.
Even that, like, when they play... I thought it was a better ending. That he was just like, I'm done. I pretty much retired 10 months ago. Because I think that to me was the meta feeling of like, yeah, your arc was over the last New Year's. Why are you still here? So then to go back to the bike thing was like, that was 2 seasons ago and nothing's changed. Way to remind me that there's actually no arc here.
I disagree. I think there's some dialogue in there.
Oh, he does call him Grandpa, yeah.
No, it's not that. It's so when he falls off his bike in the opening scene for The Woman Who Fell to Earth, he was all angry. He's like, oh, I'm sick of this stupid bike. I'm sick of falling over.
Yeah.
In this one, he mentions that he's fought like Cybermen and Daleks and the Pating of all things. So he then punctuates that with saying, I'm not going to be scared of falling off a bike. I'm gonna get back up on it. And it's like, oh, that's growth.
Yeah.
It's not good, but...
Yeah. No, I get you there. Like, yeah, it shows a change. There was no great progression that really got us there, but nice.
Yeah, it's lost in no writing for 2 seasons.
Yeah, which is kind of the way I think a lot of people feel about Clara. that like had one or two really good exits, but her character was all over the place. Although I would say the reverse here, because they were more cardboard cutouts for the most part, and it's more that they didn't really elaborate on this stuff, except for when Brian actively did things that he should struggle to do.
Call of Duty, man.
I don't know, this is the thing, it's like I bounce all over this because I'm like, I don't know what to fault.
I know.
Because it is
Kidnall.
just, I don't know what the plan is here. But it does feel like this episode brings up resolution, like we haven't really gone anywhere in the last season, but then acts like the last season contributed to that arc somehow. But then they only left because the actors left, which is fine. That's what Doctor Who does. Like, they don't really plan. I don't think they plan the exits too much. They plan each season as they go. But it does feel like if there is a 5-season plan, there's just a lot of panic. Why? Whatever that plan is, I'm going to look back and go, then why did we have the Morax? Why didn't you just do that in one season? Whatever this plan is, it's too thin.
Yeah, like I'm very curious how John Bishop's new character is going to contribute to this plan. And by curious...
Yeah, I don't even see how he's going to fit into the dynamic. I don't...
Well, I mean, it's...
And that said, that's me assuming that Yaz and the Doctor now have the dynamic.
I don't think they do.
I'm like, you finally have something. You're going to add in this other character, which I didn't want. Like, I think I watched this episode being like, oh, good. I like that we built up to Ryan and Graham leaving, because now I can rest in the hope that Yaz and the Doctor makes the show less cluttered.
Maybe she'll be a policeman next season.
And then they ended with that. Yeah. But that's when, now that they've added that guy, I'm like, oh no, they haven't learned a thing.
It's kind of bonkers, because they don't even tag the end of the episode with being like, oh, and here's John Bishop, he's joining the cast now. It's a third party video they put up of like, oh, your horoscopes saying 13's your lucky number, and then we get a shot of John Bishop, and I'm like, I don't know who you are.
And like, even if people did know who he was as a comedian, like it's the same kind of with Bradley Walsh. It's like, okay, cool, you got Bradley Walsh in your show, but yeah, who is the character? Why is this called the season 13 trailer if it's just him? Is he the new Doctor? Is he a companion? What kind of character is he gonna be? Maybe you haven't decided yet, but you can't just...
Oh, maybe he's a timeless child.
Even the Doctor... even the War Doctor was like introducing John Hurt as the War Doctor. And then we had what's the War Doctor gonna be like? How is he gonna impact the story? Not just introducing an actor, this is what season 13's about. Like, it's about having a cast cameo. What's the trailer here?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure though that just saying the War Doctor comes with it nourishes the brain with possibility. John Bishop joining a team that isn't a team.
Yeah.
Does not.
Yeah. Because it's that back to what you said. The Doctor doesn't really have a clear personality beyond slightly awkward and nice.
Yeah.
And then Yaz and the Doctor don't necessarily have a clear dynamic, even though I'm like, I at least feel like, oh good, Yaz is now willing to disagree with the Doctor. That's an improvement to me. It's not much, but it's an improvement.
Yeah.
And then you're going to add this new guy in who we don't know yet, and he's somehow going to make this coherent. It's going to come together. Like, even the fact that they added John Barrowman, we already knew his character quite well. And it was still like, how's he going to fit in to a cast who already has 4 characters and Mr. Big? And you could just see it kind of being crushed under the pressure. Like, that's why they had to cut out Mr. Big and Graham for the middle of the story, just to have enough breathing room to discuss things that had nothing to do with the plot. And these are the parts that I liked.
I kind of wonder why they keep Mr. Big alive. Like, this is the second time he's been, like, the minor antagonist of a story, and he's just gotten away with being terrible. And I'm
now convinced he's the plan. He's the villain that's going to keep popping up across this.
If I was going to choose a villain to keep popping up, it would have been the Tooth Fairy guy from episode 1, and I wouldn't have blown the load in Battle of... I don't remember the planet's name, but like...
Yeah, the Branch, Av, Kolos, something.
I watched this the other day. I cannot remember.
I see people when they reference that episode, they're still stumbling over that title.
Chibnall, never name things. Like, if you discover a rare plant, I will let the first mate decide what it's called.
It still bothers me. It made me think that I'm like, I did really, especially with this, I tried to go in like, if Chibnall's writing across these 2 seasons has not been great, his writing across Doctor Who as a whole has not been great. And I just got increasingly mad, feeling like it's just inevitable none of this is going to work. So I think especially with this, I was like, I'm going to try and find something. And even then, I didn't think I was that mad going in. It wasn't. Anyway, the thought was like, it's weird to me that Chibnall is best known as the guy who complained about how stale Doctor Who had got.
I find it very interesting that it's kind of like a lot of quotes that people say. It's like from ages past. It's like, oh, just because they say something once doesn't mean they have to believe in it now. But it's just very interesting that now he's the one in charge, and this is the state of it.
Yeah, and that's where it's like, there's the part of me that goes...
But running down corridors, it's all a bit same.
Yeah, it's like, because obviously there's a part of me that wants to analyze all this stuff without getting really personally and, like, stuck into it. And it's hard to get, like, I get frustrated with it because I'm still personally attached.
Yeah, I just don't want to be annoyed.
On the other hand, it's like, well, yeah, it's so hard to be like, oh, well, I still have to try and find a way to respect his writing choices and try and figure out what he's trying to do, because it's like, you literally, he has experience in knowing why this doesn't work. So if he doesn't believe what he said back then, he should go back and rethink what it was he didn't like about Doctor Who when he was watching it, and then apply that to his own series.
I doubt he would see it as that, because, well, there's no running up and down corridors if you're fighting a time-traveling racist in the 50s. There's no running.
I suppose, but
there's no running up and down corridors if you're on a Dalek spaceship. Those aren't corridors. It's all one hallway.
Well, I suppose, yeah, there's no running necessarily.
He is a writer who is not self-aware. That's really the thing.
Which I find is generally the biggest factor in whether writers tend to improve or not. Because it's, you see the ones that go, oh, okay, you know, we did this and that didn't quite work. Like Moffat did to an extent seem to, like, he didn't, I think every showrunner has that attitude to an extent of, I gotta do my job, I can't just constantly listen to criticism. Sometimes you just gotta do it and it's gonna work or not. But you could at least kind of see that he was, again, trying different things. And, yeah, I don't know. It's...
I mean, Moffat wrote Heaven Sent. You can strike gold if you try.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the hardest part. Like, Russell T Davies had the kind of plot stuff down. Like, even when he changed Doctors, the story elements evolved over seasons. Then Moffat was more... Moffat had the ideas and the concepts kind of down. Like, he had the monsters. He was really good at coming up with the scary monsters.
Yeah.
But even like the 50th, like I was watching the Full Fat video on it where they were talking about how they used the what are the bloodsucker things? The Zygons.
Right.
So yeah, they've got the red suckers. I keep thinking they're bloodsuckers. It's just a weird connection thing. But like they said, even with that, they hadn't used the Zygons since their first introduction. But he was like, they're a great monster to have in the 50th. And like reined himself in on some of his bad habits for the 50th, because he was like, no, I want this to be really, really good. Like when Moffat sat down and said, I want this to be good, it was great.
I like how in interviews, when talking about the 50th, he always goes back to Name of the Doctor, and how the moment he said, what if there's a secret Doctor that we've never met before? Like, he always talks about how he wishes he could take those words back. No one ever hears him, because like that kind of responsibility, I get the impression he felt that didn't sit with him to meddle with the timeline like that.
Which is funny. Like Moffat did actually say in was it the one with the Cyberman before that? Smith was going to talk about how there was a Doctor before the Doctor in the Neil Gaiman episode.
Oh yeah, Nightmare in Silver.
And Moffat was like, "No, that's too much. We don't want to know that about the Doctor." And yet, like it is interesting to see what Moffat would and wouldn't tamper with in terms of what we know about the Doctor. Whereas I do feel like with this series, there doesn't seem to be that line. And I know we did the same with Moffat. Like the fandom did be like, we believe this about Moffat. Like we made assumptions based on their bad habits. So it seems like whoever's in charge, we do.
Yeah, he gave us the Monk trilogy.
Yeah. It's just sort of like a lot of it is speculation, but there's just a vibe here of if there is a plan of any sort, it is way too vague. Like, especially the fact that season 11 didn't really set up anything except the Timeless Child in one quote.
Yeah, that's not set
But
up.
then season 12 was like, we're going to redo what Davies did with the blowing up Gallifrey and whatnot. That surely couldn't have been the actual plan. That felt like a reaction thing.
That doesn't open up the story. Like, he talks about how the Timeless Child thing was part of his initial pitch. This was in an interview. But, like, he talked about how the Timeless Children was in his initial pitch to the BBC for what to do. As an idea to open it up.
Yeah.
And the only way it opens up Doctor Who to be able to explore other places in the timeline is if we get the announcement of the 10 Disney spin-off films of these different characters. But we're not going to get that, so...
Like what the Doctor said themselves, what does it mean that any of that exists? Like, even if she goes after it and explores it, the answer's gotta be insane, surely, because it'll just be like, you've got to replace the Time Lords with something.
What does this actually change?
It really is like swapping out the concept. It's like we complain about Last Jedi undoing Luke's arc just to do it again in Last Jedi, but it's more like they came across, if Last Jedi had been like, Darth Vader was never really your father, it was Sidious all along, of course we'd all be like, why? But that's effectively what it is. It's actually like lifting out the Time Lords. Sure, the Time Lords weren't there from the absolute beginning. Like, it's that same argument with like the screwdriver wasn't always there, so you can take it out for a bit. The TARDIS was stuck on Earth for a bit. We can change it up, but it really is, to its core, at the point where whatever you replace that with has got to be as definitive and iconic as the Time Lords. And given Chibnall's run with the monster replacement, when he didn't want to bring any monsters back and made his own, all of the decent plot ideas have just been Davies redubbed.
Why is he so proud of the Pating?
Yeah, it's just Stitch. Like, and I feel like I'm being mean-spirited with that, but it's just like...
Yeah, I'm offended on Stitch's behalf.
There is just a sense of this, like, why is this the plan? What? I want to see that pitch.
We're never going to get the pitch.
Because if it is genuinely 5 years and he's like, well, 2 years in, in the first year of the plan, I'll just mention it offhand. We won't do anything about it. We're just going to have all the characters cardboard cutout.
Yeah, we're just going to use this to get a feel of things. We're going to get used to a female doctor.
Yeah,
a large
they're all going to stand in a line and say nothing. And then in the second season, we'll bring everything back.
Oh wait, no, hang on. They did bring back the Absorbaloff. He was in the montage.
Yeah. It was like, I get the idea of the first season we'll do our own thing, and then the second season we'll put it back in, like Davies did a classic era monster every season. But that's the big difference. Is Davies brought it back slowly. This show just went, we're not doing any of it, then we're doing all of it.
Yeah.
And as someone, I forget who pointed out, we've had even with the Master and the Cybermen, that's the third time now we've had the Master work with the Cybermen in a row. And literally the last time was the season 10, season 12, and season 8.
Yeah, and what's very interesting about the season 10 one is I think, like, obviously the Dr. Falls is a bit screwy, but it's like chef's kiss. Like that is some good stuff.
See, I will always have my problems with the way I feel Bill was treated, although when I did watch that back, I realized that the part I missed was when the doctor said, I can't promise you that you won't get killed. And
how did you miss that? They literally flash back to it.
I know, but I literally,
shot.
I was just so caught up in the, he did the fake regeneration thing and messed with her, but that was traumatic. And then she was like, please don't get me killed. I don't trust Missy. And he's like, that'll be fine. Then he was in the control room casually being like, she's fine, even though Missy wasn't, taking it seriously at all. I was just mad at the doctor for being absolutely careless. So when she got killed, it was tragic. It worked, but I was so upset by it that I was just like, I hate this. The Capaldi never fully got the comeuppance to me. They didn't quite pay off what a mistake he'd made. It just kind of, everyone died and he was very sad about it. But that said, it's but it is meant to be a tragic, he's trying his best. He put all his cards in thinking Missy would actually change. And she did.
Yeah.
And I think, again, as Full Fat pointed out, she didn't actually turn on Bill. It wasn't Missy's fault. The Capaldi was right. She just got killed anyway. But it's I don't know. It's just mixed feelings with that.
I'm still gonna defend that to the grave, I guess.
Yeah.
I
and
still,
it's so as a tragedy, I think it does work.
I still really love the dialogue. You said you could fix this. Were you lying? No. Were you right? No. It's those small things is yeah, that's probably fucked up, but
yeah.
But in another way, it's
I think much
it reveals
with
something.
a lot of yeah, and that's with a lot of Capaldi stuff. I'm finding that, but this is where there's always a weird relationship with this show. Yeah, there's episodes in season 10 where I think in Oxygen, Bill is tell me a joke. And Capaldi's like, nah, I can't. And she's like, but you always tell me a joke.
No. It's the other way around. It's the doctor's making jokes because he's blind now, and Bill's like, oh, you're always telling jokes. Can you take things seriously? And he's like, oh, what's the point of life if you can't tell jokes?
But there's a point where she puts
I swear I am a scholar.
I think he's there is a scene though where he's like, I'm gonna have to fake your death, or I'm gonna have to kill you or something. And she's like, oh, well, it's gonna be all right though, isn't it? Tell me a joke before you go, and he doesn't. She's really concerned. That's what I remember. But yeah, it's a lot of I haven't really revisited season 10 as much, but it feels like I'm appreciating Capaldi a lot more because again, it's that Moffat thing of Moffat had I had a lot of problems with season 7 and well, I was right on that train of Moffat, but then of course once he left and we got Chibnall's era, much like Dave, people were complaining about Davies' era back when Davies was in charge, and then when Moffat came in, everyone was like, oh, but Davies had through line and arcs and it's always been. I start to appreciate what we had once we get the next thing. But I feel here,
yeah,
sure, I'm starting to appreciate Series 11 more than Series 12, but I'm still not it's good. I'm Chibnall's era has come nowhere near close to anything. The best in this series is still middle ground for any other series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I just watched this episode with a lot of time gap between the Timeless Child thing and now. Well, I was just I know, I'm still mad at it. I genuinely did go into this still mad at the Timeless Child thing. But I think once we just had the close quarters conversations, I was just I don't know, just breathed a bit, and I started to enjoy it. But if I go back through, because now I'm thinking like there are definitely things in the episode that I want to specifically point out.
I'm just scrolling through the episode and I'm at the scene where Leo says, and I cloned them. I grew a creature, and it's like,
Yeah.
Sorry? What?
Yeah. Actually, they say that the Dalek thing happened last season for the New Year's, and then they said 367 minutes later, and then like they pick up at the start, like they pick up the Dalek casing the same day, and then despite that, the TARDIS team have been looking for them the last 10 months.
Oh, right, yeah.
So it took him 10 months to clone the Dalek?
Well, no. Not to clone the Dalek, for the protest video to appear online. Because that's what Graham and Ryan show Yaz. They go like, here's this video that appeared online, and I'm like, oh, already that's pretty contrived that someone leaked a video of this.
Yeah.
Considering they were all paid, I imagine people on their phones would have been told to put it away.
Yeah, but I guess what my point is though is like they were looking for the Doctor 10 months ago.
Yes.
And yet this episode kind of acts like the Dalek thing just happened. Or that they took the Dalek casing back then and haven't mentioned it, haven't done anything with it.
Well, obviously, it wasn't part of the plan.
That's what I mean, like it's so weirdly connected for something that's supposedly possibly planned out.
I don't mind that. I don't think it's good, but it's like one thing I like about arachnids in the UK is they say, oh, we've only been gone about 30 minutes, meaning the prologue kind of events for arachnids in the UK were taking place around about the same time as Woman Who Fell to Earth. Like, I quite like that. I quite like that
sure.
things are happening in this world, whether or not we're there.
Yeah, sure.
It's just a matter of making sure they all line up.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, no, I get you. But like, yeah, it's just sort of. I guess for me, that's what my brain has done a weird thing where I've basically pretending that season 12 didn't happen. Except for obviously the Timeless Child thing because they mention it.
It's very important.
But then it's like, yeah, if this episode is building off the last Dalek thing, but that was actually that long ago. I don't know. Again, maybe it's just a sloppy thing of why didn't they acknowledge that time gap on the Dalek side? They just kind of, it just took them as long as it took for the Doctor to come back.
I don't know. It's like this episode has a brick wall in front of it that you got to sort of chisel down in order to actually figure out what is the exact criticism here. Because like the 10 months thing I find really annoying. The decision or the thought at the end of like, oh, I could just go back in time and change history so none of this happens is like, okay, that's a bit strange. The fact that she spends 19 years in prison and then later on says, oh, I spent decades wondering about this timeless child stuff. I like that things are happening in the background.
Yeah.
But I need a flow chart is really it to figure out, okay, well, when did they start cloning cells?
Yeah.
When did they finish production? Because like this is a year time frame, really. Actually,
and I think that's the challenge with like especially criticism around like geological and like time specific or detail specific stuff. Like I think we do get very bogged down. How does this work? Why does this work? And whatnot. And that's where it's challenging as criticism because it's like, what's I think really happening here is it just kind of goes. It's just like, hey, remember we had that Dalek before? Well, yeah, we got one now. But it took the Doctor a while to come back, so they're mad about it. Okay, well, how did that work? They just built another Dalek, and the Doctor came back. Just go with it. And you kind of like, yeah, but how? Like, I'm not getting grounded by this. It's just I think especially because it starts off with the Doctor in prison, but the prison really doesn't matter. It has no meaning to it's just there to get Jack in the plot. But Jack could have contacted her any other way. So we get this sense that on the one hand, the Doctor's been in there for, did you say 19 years?
Yeah.
And she's saying, I've been in there for decades. I guess, yeah, sure, is 19 years.
I can't even remember now. I think it was 19 years. I swear she says that at some point.
Yeah.
Although
I think
it might have been Jack saying, it took me 19 years to get to the cell next to you.
Yeah, he did say that, yeah.
Okay, then she might have been in there for decades. But we're only told that. We don't get to experience that.
And that's exactly it. So you got the cliffhanger of her being in the prison. I immediately went, that's not going to last. Like, it's like when they went to space. Like, they popped into space, and I was like, well, obviously next episode, the first 5 seconds is going to be them getting out of that completely. They're not just going to be floating there. Something's going to spontaneously save them. And in this case, it was Jack. But she's been there for decades. We don't feel that. We're just like, hey, Doctor's in prison. But never mind that. Doctor's back on Earth. And the companions have been looking for her for 10 months. But never mind that. They're just mad about it. But there's this Dalek. Remember back last year? The Dalek? That matters now. Ignore everything in between. Just remember the last New Year's. If you don't, we'll play a clip of it. There you go. And then, like, so it's this kind of like, just to let me feel the situation. But it's just kind of like, I don't buy that there's a Dalek invasion. I mean, I buy it to the extent that I usually buy it. It's Doctor Who sci-fi, but it's just like, I think that's why I like the conversations, because I was just like, it's just them together feeling like people talking. It felt somewhat organic. Whereas as soon as they cut to like Mr. Big being like, oh, I'm rich and evil and I'm going to work with the Daleks just because, you're like, yeah, why not? Like, I immediately shrug anytime he's on. I think that's why, even when he was in the Spider episode, and you were telling me, like, this episode's not great. And I remember me and you watched it together, and I was like, I'm actually enjoying this. And you're like, oh, why? And I was like, because this guy's so goofy that I don't have to take this seriously. I can literally go, there is no point caring about this. And I stop caring, and that allows me to not be mad at it. But that's the only way. Like, it has to be that dumb that I can just not care.
I was like, remember back when Capaldi was playing the Doctor, we would always say, well, he's elevating the material.
Yeah.
And that is because he's a good actor given horse shit scripts.
Yeah.
Mr. Big is a terrible actor. Elevating it because he is insane given insane scripts.
Yeah. Yeah, the scene where he was yelling at someone, he's like, you never showed this to me. It's like,
oh,
this is great.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's that kind of like, as soon as I'm like, why does this matter? Why are we here? My brain just explodes because I'm like, well, clearly the script doesn't care. It just does not care. There's no thought put into this at all. I can't even pretend there is. But I think that's the point. Like, my brain just goes, the dumb stuff including around the Daleks and the Doctor randomly calling the SAS Daleks. Like, she's like, how am I going to get rid of the Daleks?
Oh, no.
I'll just call more Daleks. And I'm like, there is no natural trigger that would create that response.
The Doctor wouldn't enlist the Daleks. Like that should be a core principle of the character is greatest enemy.
Yeah,
the
but
Daleks.
but that's on par with the Holder maneuver. Like, just, it's a thing that you can apparently do now that just works. Okay. again, then why didn't she ever do that before? But at the same time, why would you do that? Like, it seems like suicide. Like, it's sort of...
Until you realize you could just make a droid do that, couldn't you? Like, it's literally just buttons, and now, thanks to Tross, it's a 1 in a million thing. So it's like, there are countless opportunities where you would do the holdo maneuver, and you would just end up in another bit of space perfectly fine.
Except, Holdo said that she was mad that someone put the plan on bad odds. But anyway.
Yeah.
It's in this specific case, it's more the question of, why did the Doctor think that would work? Why was that the Doctor's first thought anyway?
Yeah.
And why hasn't the Doctor ever done this if it does work? And then it does work because the plot just needs it to.
Yeah, I find it very interesting. They describe it as the nuclear option. And I thought, oh, is she going to launch nukes? And it's like, oh no, she's just going to do something stupid.
But it's also like, again, it's that grounded foundational feeling to it. That you got this Dalek that the other Daleks don't like. And I like the idea of Daleks warring against each other. Like, I enjoyed it.
I'm sick of it. Like, Daleks Take Manhattan is possibly the only version of that. I don't quite like those episodes. I don't like a lot of episodes of Doctor Who, to be honest. Like, it's amazing I'm still a fan, considering how much I don't like...
it's that weird feeling, like 50% of it is us being like, why is this an episode?
Yeah, but it's like...
The episodic stuff is never great.
The reason Daleks Take Manhattan works is because this was them trying to survive. This was them going like, oh, we're gonna fuse with a human to survive. And then what they don't like is that he has humanity. It's not that he's a human Dalek hybrid.
Yeah.
He has emotions now. This thing that they see as a weakness, so they need to get rid of that. Whereas this is just like, you're a genetic cup.
And it's not just like pew pew Dalek or Dalek. Like, it's... There's actually a plot and story around it. Like, I did feel that to an extent in this. That, like, when the Daleks met the other Daleks and they're like, you're impure. But I can become pure. It's like, okay, you got the character's one thing is it's defined by wanting to kill everything in sight, and nothing escapes. And sure, Daleks have worked with humans before, but like Mr. Big shows up and they're like, we will listen to you, and then we will shoot you.
Yeah, that's insane.
And he's like talking to them, and they're like, okay, good idea. And same with the Dalek. It's like, okay, if you're that like single-minded, like you must be destroyed. There is no way we are going to let you in. Then why are you talking? Why have this conversation? Just shoot it.
I quite like the alternate version of this where they ask him, it's like, you'd be willing to betray your own kind, and he says yes, and they go like, well, that's not a quality that the Daleks like, so they just sort of kill him there.
Yeah.
It was like, apparently everyone in this universe has a flexible sense of morality, even absolutists. Why would the Daleks honor not really honor, but like agree to work with Mr. Big if his whole thing is nothing is sacred?
It's sort of
I don't know, it just seemed natural to kill him there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, even if they did let him live, I understand that more than the Dalek talking to the other Dalek. Like, it felt like it was trying to be threatening. That they were like, he's trying to bargain, the other Dalek is trying to bargain for its life. But the Daleks are like, we will not move, we will kill you no matter what you say. And you can see the Dalek desperately trying to, but it's like, well then, I guess it's just, I get this sense from this episode that anything could have happened at any time, and it would make just as much or just as little sense. Killing Mr. Big at that point would make sense, because you'd be like, yeah, Daleks kill everybody. But then them also letting him on the ship because he can tell them the plan, Daleks would also want that. But then neither really makes sense because Robertson doesn't have a clear motive. He's just evil guy. He just dodgy.
Do you reckon this would have worked better if... So one thing I really freaking hate about Resolution is the Daleks are now able to mind control people. Like, they can escape their casing and control a person. Like, imagine if in that scene, one of the clone Daleks latched onto Mr. Big and was like, I am controlling this now. I'm a Dalek. Look at me. And they'd be like, ooh, new powers. Like, I wonder if that would give more believability to them letting him live in that specific moment.
Yeah,
just because they're confused.
They only take him because they can control him. Which, when I think about Remembrance of the Daleks, that little girl was being controlled as well, I think. But it's kind of that, like, again, it feels like that everything that is decent about this has been done better elsewhere. It really is. Just...
Why is it ultraviolet light allows for the Daleks to teleport?
I have no idea.
Like that, I can't see any logic in that. Same as, how do you arrest a statue?
That's what. It. I don't know. It. Like you said, it's hard to critique. It's like the pacing of this between, like, we have a Dalek, but then there was a long time before they made the Dalek, but then they made the Dalek, but the Doctor's back, so it's fine. But then the Doctor has conversations that, again, I liked in a bubble, but it's like they basically stop the plot to have these heart-to-heart talks that have nothing to do with the plot around them, and then they go to the plot, but then the Doctor's like, I'll just bring in some Daleks. And then I just, like, nothing breathes except for that conversation, but the conversation is so irrelevant to the rest of it that just, like, the Dalek plot makes no sense. And I can't even grasp where to start with it. Because it is just, stuff is happening with the Dalek. The Dalek's just there. The Daleks are just shooting stuff. The Doctor just comes up with a plan that is not triggered by anything. Like, usually there's a situation, like a very specific situation, where the Doctor is talking their way through it and trying to work out where the flaw in the plan is. But here it was just like, just come up with something outside of the plot that is just doable. There's nothing, you could have done anything.
Well, this whole episode is focused on this idea of, like, hey, do you remember this? Do you remember that? There's a lot of I'm immortal. It's partly the Doctor's fault. It's partly Rosa's fault, but she's trapped in another dimension.
Like, even that, just a casual mention of, like, oh, by the way, remember this thing? It's like,
can we get back to the episode, please? Daleks, I'm sending you to the void that hasn't been mentioned in a very long time, possibly not since the Battle of Canary Wharf.
Actually, it was weird too that, so I was just thinking about that Jack, like, why is Jack back was one of my main questions.
Because he was back in,
and it's funny that
episode 5. Because he was back in episode 5 and people wanted him. There was no logic.
Like, that's where, though, I think I appreciated the Jack and Yaz thing, because it really reflected where Jack sits with the Doctor now, but also seemed to matter to one of the immediate companions. But on that, I can't believe that when the Ruth episode happened, I was like, Jack is completely random and pointless. He's just there to tell me the Cyberman thing. That doesn't come up until later. So, whatever. And then Doctor ignores it anyway. But I can't believe that I was like, if Jack can interact with the Doctor, then it might matter. But now, I'm like, Jack and the Doctor had no need to ever talk to each other.
Yes.
It was Yaz and Jack who actually had the connection.
I'm just reminded of, they hand wave the, don't give the Cyberman what it wants thing again.
Yeah.
It's like, I did, but I dealt with it. It's like, okay, what was the stress then? Where in the timeline is Jack? But it's kind of like, it's very interesting that we keep meeting Jack in chronological order When in a time
Yeah.
travel thing, it'd be like, no, it's not likely.
Yeah, oh yeah. It's funny we don't get more of it. That things happen out of order. But yeah, I think it's also just so that people can follow it. Like,
Yeah, I guess.
River Song's journey was one of the most confusing things.
That's kind of a problem we have with it. Chibnall's era. It's like it's not set up, so it's like when it happens, it's like, oh, okay, I guess. Am I meant to feel things?
Yeah. It's actually, yeah, it's like emotional grounding. It's like, what am I actually meant to care about here?
I'd probably just like, I was thinking, I was like, well, what how would I describe it? And what I think I would land on is like an emotional plateau, but not like on the peak of a mountain. It's like just at the bottom. It's nothing. It is the stretch of land right before the stairways to Victory Road or whatever. This whole Dalek thing wouldn't have happened, and I've got the episode up right now, and I'm at the scene where Leo is at the incinerator with a case with a Dalek. If he hadn't opened the case,
Yeah.
and just let that be incinerated, because I imagine that's not fireproof. I imagine the fire would eventually break through it. It would, it would kill the Dalek. Is really it. Like there's no reason to open the case. Just slide it in.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have an episode. So he had to be a genius to clone, but not a genius that he can't get another case, I guess.
This is why, like, yeah, as soon as I think about how the Dalek plot functions.
But that's kind of the issue, because the Dalek plot is what's driving the episode forwards, as terrible as that is.
But that's why I feel like I enjoyed I keep coming back to, I enjoyed the conversations in isolation, because they take a break from that nonsense and actually just have the characters be vulnerable. It's just like, that's more, I want more of that, I guess is my thing, but it's like, yeah, 80% of this episode isn't that.
So the Doctor's now on the TARDIS. Jack hands her a pair of her clothes. Will she have a sonic screwdriver going forwards? Because that should still be at the prison.
Should it?
It should be, because she made that in episode 1. She made that one, remember? So it's like, unless she's gonna get another one, where she, like, if they just revert back to she had it all along, it was just in her coat, or she left it on the TARDIS, which I'm like, no, it was definitely in her pocket.
Yeah.
That's gonna be something that's gonna bug only me.
Well, I didn't think of that in terms of it's happened. So they took it from her when they put her in the prison.
Well, they would have, because she's wearing the prison uniform, the red jumpsuit.
But she was immediately teleported to the cell. Like, again, they completely jumped over it all. They're like, she's imprisoned, and now she's not.
Would they let her keep the sonic screwdriver, the Deus Ex Machina that'll get her out?
I assume not, but like, there's no clear, I forget the word for it. I keep saying there's no trigger, but it's like, what's the plot point element that gets us to the rest of it? Like, what they, like, the reason they put her in the prison was because they thought she was Ruth. I get that. But then she gets out because Jack is just there.
Yes.
Like,
he heard a rumor that the Doctor was there, so he committed a bunch of crimes. Actually, a lot of crimes.
Yeah. But we're just told this after the fact.
Congratulations, Chibnall. You're a genius.
It's just, yeah, I don't even want to call it lazy. It's like...
Yeah, lazy people can achieve more.
Well, I feel like at least laziness usually comes with a more sense of fun. Where it's like, I don't know how the big dragon got there, but it's a dragon. Whereas it's more like, I don't know how she got out. Jack has a random bubble. and they just leave. Like, I do feel like the reason I enjoyed this was because I just shut my brain off for the rest of it. And when I don't care about the rest of it, to the point where I was like, oh, I care about the part where Jack feels bad he hasn't seen the doctor in a while. I'll take it, and the rest of it, throw it in a bin.
This has just been terrible, and reliving it has been horrific. Here's an interesting thought. Like, what if the prison thing... Like, I remember in a chat message yesterday, I said, wouldn't it have been more interesting if she just completely just served her sentence and we get to her at the end?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, okay, the Jadoon can't pick her up again for being the doctor.
Oh, sure.
So that eliminates that nonsense threat. And there's a part of me that's like, well, that seems more logical than... And then one day Jack showed up.
I feel like my first thought there was that would remove both the... Then what's the point of the Ruth plot? Because apparently she's absolved of that. Like, she's done her sentence.
It brings me to my new thought, and that is, what if... Like, why did this have to be a New Year's special is the first part. And the second part would be, what if this was more like Heaven Sent, where she's trapped in the prison and we just sort of watch her for an episode.
Yeah.
She's on her own and she's...
That would be nice, but it brings me back to, is Whittaker actually a good doctor?
No.
But then, like, it's like with Capaldi, like, where I might have been back and forth, but when Capaldi had an episode on his own, I was like, oh my god, this is what I want to see from this doctor. Like, that I'm so glad to have seen him on his own, because he finally just got to be the doctor without any plot clutter or anything letting him down. It was just him and his performance. Like, just sold it 100%.
Yeah.
Half of what I think lets Whittaker down is she has to bounce back from 3 companions who all stand there and go, okay, cool. Usually in the series 11 especially, there'd be long lengths of exposition of her being like, this is this thing, and this is how this works, and blah, 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 sci-fi nonsense. And then they'd be like, okay, yep, understood. And, like, there'd be no interaction because they're just cardboard cutouts, and she's just giving long-winded exposition that even Whittaker's struggling to say. It would be interesting to see what she's like on her own without being bogged down by the companions. But I don't know if it'll be enough.
I get this horrible feeling that the BBC really hate Heaven Sent. They're like, wow, this is really boring. This isn't what kids want. We're meant to be appealing to a younger demographic. Who cares about Peter Capaldi running through a castle? Completely missing the fact that, no, it's the best episode, possibly, of the entire thing.
Yeah.
So, like, there is that thought in the back of my mind that the BBC really hates Heaven Sent, and they will not do that with Jodie Whittaker.
Yeah, that's curious.
It's based on nothing, but...
But I do feel like this does certainly feel like after school special. Nothing's really thought out because kids won't notice.
I don't know, the Magic School Bus was a lot better than this.
Yeah. I think I said, like, I haven't properly seen the Sarah Jane Adventures, but I feel like it's more in line with that tone of, like, or the way I imagine Sarah Jane Adventures is. Like, very kid-friendly, very educationally, very, I don't know. But even that, I don't expect Sarah Jane necessarily to be teaching me about history. This feels like it's gone right back. To be like, well, classic series had 3 companions off the bat and was just there to teach kids about science stuff. But then they realized modern audiences were bored by that, so they just shoved everything they could think of in to be cool about, like, now it's just after school special plus a lot of action sequences. And I'm like, I don't know where to place this. I don't, like, every time I think of why it doesn't work for me, I think of episodes that did the exact opposite and still didn't work for me.
Ah, yes. Resolution of the Daleks.
It feels like the 3-parter with the monks. Like it looks like it's trying to be some kind of arc, but I'm just so confused.
There's a very interesting thing I remember seeing a while ago in regards to the next Spider-Man film, Spider-Man 3 in the MCU.
Yeah.
And that is, you need to have watched Spider-Man 1, 2, 3, The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, possibly Venom, and then Civil War, Infinity War and Endgame, as well as Spider-Man Homecoming and Far From Home, in order to understand this one film.
I hadn't thought about that.
Like it's all to do with speculation that this is going to be a Spider-Verse film. The casting of Alfred Molina as Doc Ock.
Yeah, I assume
and
that
Jamie
was basically
Foxx
confirmed by now. But yeah.
We haven't seen anything of the set to really know. But like, it's just this: if Revolution of the Daleks is a bookend to any particular story, if it's meant to be like a monk trilogy kind of thing, it's like, how many episodes do we need to understand this?
See, I'd argue it's Timeless Child, the Resolution, and that's assume and the Woman Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah.
Because that would be like, you wouldn't get
spiders.
Oh yeah.
We need to see arachnids
to
really understand who the hell.
There is the argument that you wouldn't need to see any of it because.
But there's throwaway dialogue that explains everything aside from Grace appearing at the end.
But I get what you mean. Like, it's not going to have the same sense of payoff without those. But then, having seen those, it's still not that.
Oh yeah.
It's so loose.
Yeah.
That it's. This is what I feel. It's like with Timeless Child, it was like, okay, so I feel like in order to feel the full payoff of this, I need to have seen the Cyberman episode, the one before it with the horror,
Haunting of
the Mary Shelley episode, then the Ruth episode, and then the two-parter at the start. And yet, the Timeless Child doesn't actually set up the Timeless Child thing at all during that season. So I don't need to watch any of that. So that's why it falls apart on me.
Hey, do you remember that specific shot in, what is it? It's Ascension of the Cybermen. That was the Cybermen story of last season, yeah?
Yeah.
Just the one shot of the heads of Cybermen flying around like little drones.
Yeah.
I think that on top of the clip of the Doctor leaving the Master to the Nazis and the Cybermen with the giant Gallifreyan collars is what will define Chibnall's run. It's flashy visuals that are terrible. It's mixed messages. It's fiddling with things that you don't need to.
Yeah, bizarre plot elements that don't mesh, but all seem like they're going for something in their own right. It's like on their own, I'm like, oh, okay, the Cybermen Time Lords
is terrible.
That sounds like you could do something with it, but they're like, oh, it's just there with the Master, and they're just there. We just smashed it with all the other stuff. Like, it's not, they're not great ideas either, but it's like, even if you stopped and just did one of them fleshed out, it is just like, you would need to do that, but he just keeps throwing stuff at the wall. Like, this episode has the mind-controlling Dalek, but if they had the Dalek back then, why didn't they do anything with it? I get that the implication is he didn't clone it till now, but that's arbitrary. It's just, there's no cause and effect. It's just we have
effect.
Ruth Doctor, and then we have the Cyberman Jack just shows up. And then because he mentioned the Cyberman, that shows up. And then the Master just shows up again when it was supposed to be a Cyberman 3-parter. And then just when we're like, okay, Timeless Child, let's go with that. They're like, nah. We're doing another Dalek mind control thing. What's that about? Oh, remember that last one we did a while ago?
I try not to.
Based on that. I don't begrudge it's not that they can't build off, they don't have to build off the last thing they did, but it's like they keep throwing new things at us without exploring anything. And then when they do throw the new things come with new things of their own, and it becomes so convoluted that I'm not even sure what it's supposed to connect to. Like, even having seen Resolution, I'm not like, this is a perfect sequel to it. You know, if you just ignore the season between, it doesn't have to include everything, but at least explore what Resolution did. But then this episode is like, Ryan and Graham are basically wanting to retire. Okay, cool. But that does kind of make me think, well, yeah, they should have done that right after Resolution. So then what's the point of the episodes in between? Oh, well, Timeless Child. But no, definitely not. It's not. I can't actually piece it together, and that makes me go, you know, this build onto this, and then this thing over here. It's multi-layered. There's different plots running through it, but they all add up to something or other.
Yeah.
It just feels more disconnected ideas that eventually get brought back and then confused. It's not.
Go on.
I know, that's basically it. Just that every time they reintroduce something, I get less clear on what it was meant to be doing.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. While you were saying that, I was thinking, do you remember how Twice Upon a Time, how that starts with something corny? It's like 927 episodes ago, and that still feels natural.
Yeah.
Chibnall is literally writing a sequel to an episode he wrote, and it's like none of these pieces line up. And
which is, though, people have been claiming that, I'm not entirely sure if it's true or not, but it feels true, that the 4th episode of season 11 and the New Year's special were 2 of the least watched episodes. So it is bizarre to me to take those 2 episodes and build a sequel out of it.
I'm just gonna get you to keep talking while I Google this.
So yeah, I assume the reason Twice Upon a Time works. I agree, it's not great, but works to the extent that it does, like you said, by pulling back, is that because the story is Capaldi ending his run. So it at least thematically ties in. But if you're going to introduce the first Doctor, you'd be like, well, Capaldi was the first Doctor of the new cycle, so we're going to flash back to the first Doctor of the old cycle and set that up as the core interaction of the episode. And it is about Capaldi talking to, in the same way, the War Doctor doesn't necessarily break anything, because the 50th episode is about Smith at the time. Well, it's about the War Doctor more specifically, but Smith going back and changing the Gallifrey explosion. So then the War Doctor is that thematic, being like,
this is what you were, but it's not what you are.
Yeah, and it's like, it is a comparison
that's
thing.
Nice.
It's bringing in a character who directly conflicts and pushes personal stakes on the main character. Although in that sense, it is about Smith, but it's about all 3 of them, and they push each other. Like, even the idea that he's like, did you count? Then Tennant's like, you know, whatever the number is, says 7 billion or whatever it is. And then Smith is like, oh, I didn't, you know, I've got that out of order. But, like, even they're all pushing each other.
I get what you mean.
Whereas in this, it's like, why?
They're pushing each other, but it's like they're all pushing each other in unison towards like a paddling pool.
Which I guess comes back to the character foundations. Like, why does it matter that the Doctor was in prison for however long, because we didn't feel it, and then she comes back, the companions are upset, and then they leave?
I find that more insane that the Jadoon imprisoned her for being the Doctor. The Doctor that they're actually after isn't someone that has ever come up before now.
Yeah.
And we're being told, yeah, well, there's countless other versions of it. So it's
and
like,
they existed before Hartnell, supposedly. So why haven't they been
Yeah.
chasing her the entire time?
yeah. So what were the two episodes again? Arachnids and Resolution. Okay, so they don't have the lowest viewing figures. That's Witchfinders. No, sorry, that's It Takes You Away and Battle of Ranskor of
Right,
Kalos.
that's actually surprising to me, but
That's not total. That's the overnight viewing figures, but It Takes You Away is 5.07 million, and Battle is 5.32 million.
Okay. I thought there was an episode with 4 point something. I'm not sure which.
No, that was in Capaldi's run.
Okay.
That would have been. I can look for it.
Well, at least that's a good sign that the ratings aren't as low.
I mean, I feel like, yeah, those are good numbers, but also I don't really have scope.
Yeah.
Yeah, the lowest was the Eaters of Light.
Okay.
In Capaldi's run, that was 2.89 million overnight viewers. So it's like, if that's as low as it gets, and I still consider that episode to be just fine, people need to sort out their priorities.
I suppose it is like what we're doing. We're not enjoying it, but we're still watching it. So it's like, the viewing doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's loving it. We're just committed.
Oh, there's something interesting. Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, I got that wrong again. It was It Takes You Away and Resolution. Resolution only had 5.15 million. But I reckon that is to do with the fact that it was a New Year's thing and not Christmas. But if we're just counting for the series, it would still be episode 10, the battle thing. But if the lowest is 5.07, it's very interesting that no episode in series 12 ever reached that point. Like, they've all been 4.6, 4.2, 3.8. And Revolution only had 4.6 million viewers overnight.
Yeah.
So it's like, we're seeing a downward trend. I can't tell if that's because they started last season at New Year's and just continued and didn't really tell anyone about it.
Which was my assumption.
Or if this show is just not good anymore.
See, as much as I would go with that, I'm like, I don't think it necessarily affects the viewing, because like we said, we're still watching it. So it's... I agree with the New Year's thing was more likely the time and place of it. I've always maintained viewing figures are more determined by how accessible it was than whether people were liking it or not. Because the first episode had 10 really shot up high because of the amount of advertising and stuff. So it didn't matter whether people liked the first episode or not. That one got high because a lot of people heard about it and it got the buzz and controversy and whatnot. So it just got a high viewing. Capaldi's era, you're looking at people came in for the 50th, but then Capaldi's run just went down. You could argue because the writing wasn't great, but I feel like it's just more, you're on your 10th season, you're just bound to start. People moved on. I know a lot of fans who were fans of Smith, and once Smith was done, they were done. And it's there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's just, it's just a show running past its prime. But I feel like in quality terms, we can only blame so much of that on why the show has gotten the way it is. I'm not well, after a while, show's just not going to be as good as it was. Because I've been watching, say, Power Rangers for 20 seasons. And yeah, it's gone up and down. There's been some really bad stuff, especially when Saban rebought it. But, like, if you love it that much and people care, it will go up and down, but it'll never just drop and stay there. Like, there comes a point where it's like, okay, maybe around season 10, people dropped off a bit because you'd already had Davies left, people watched Smith, they got a bit sick of Moffat. The Capaldi was very
different, like, classic era, very sick of him.
Inconsistent writing, people dropped off. But you should have, if the first female Doctor comes in, you have 10 million viewers. That, you shouldn't then just be like, and people then re-dropped off. Like, it's not just, you were down there and stayed there, no one noticed. People noticed, and then they left.
Yeah, which is very interesting, because I don't know where I would rank it, but I still think her first episode isn't terrible. Like, I hate the Tooth Fairy, but like...
Yeah, I enjoyed it enough. I did think, oh, cool, I'm interested where this is going. Like I said, it was Rosa for me that had me going, oh, I thought in the first episode they established that Yaz was a policeman and Graham had cancer and had problems with, like, being a grandfather to Ryan, and Grace had died. And, like, you had a lot of decent foundation here, stuff to work on, stuff to develop. I agree with people who are like, just because Ryan has the dyspraxia doesn't mean every episode has to be about him overcoming it. But it's like...
It's just very interesting that it's very inconsistent with when it applies.
Yeah, you just needed something for each character that carried them through. But they just kept... They dropped the dyspraxia thing to the point where, like, he was shooting a gun or he jumped off the conveyor belt, and it's... You could say, oh, well, that's showing that he got over it, but it's like, cool, but what else does Ryan have? Because if that's not his main character flaw, what is? And it's...
I can't wait to get over my type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, it's like, again, the whole Graham having cancer thing didn't need to be the main plot, but there's got to be something, some reason he is here, emotionally invested. And we said during season 11...
Well, he's there for Ryan.
Yeah, it felt... What was it in season 11 when the Doctor's like, if you all want to go home, that's okay, and then was awkward where they're like, do you want to come? And she's like, I guess so. Like, clearly baiting for them to invite her. But the sense that, like, they just wanted to go home and she was inviting herself, like, it actually felt like the companions didn't want to be there. And that's where I was like, Rosa was good for Rosa, but the other characters just walked into an area where there was intense racism, and they dealt with that, but that doesn't necessarily feed back into their core characteristics. So that's good as a once-off, but that's when it hit me, that they weren't developing anything specific and concrete. They were just going to pick and choose each episode what they felt like bringing up. And then the rest of the episodes contradicted it.
It's like in D&D, rolling for initiative.
Yeah.
They were rolling a number, and it's like, if it's a 7, he's dyspraxic this time.
But yeah, then there's other episodes where he's not, he's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, this is where I don't full on know enough about dyspraxia to be like, maybe that's actually decent representation, but I'm talking purely as character foundation. It's like, especially with the Doctor. It's like, okay, she's awkward, but what does that do? And then, okay, Gallifrey got burnt again, but apart from being sad about it, like we were before, what does that do? Why does that matter?
I think we're just more sad that all of that hard work has gone, like, it was for nothing.
Yeah, especially when I recently rewatched the 50th, and they're like, he's like, I've seen it burn and I never want to see that again. And it's like, well, it didn't last very long.
Imagine if he said that to the Master, and then that was just like this sort of Damocles hanging over their relationship.
Yeah.
It's like, that is the thing that will set the Doctor off. So that is the thing that the Master will do.
Yeah, which
but
is
the Master
fine.
isn't there. So
Yeah.
like that's just an alternative universe version of this where it's like better.
Yeah, we at least get why he did that beyond. He's mad about it. He found out the Time Lords are liars.
I thought we figured that out. When was it? When did we get this shitty Kid Master where he's looking into the time vortex and he's inspired to be a dickhead? Was that season 3 or 4?
Yeah. Might be Sound of Drums.
Yeah, in any case, it's like, it's nothing new.
Yeah.
Like, the Time Lords have been dickheads since the 70s.
Again, though, that's what it feels like. Like, the Master is acting very like John Sims' chaotic Master. The time burning Gallifreys, because that's what happened with Tennant's era. Like, it does feel a little, let's just try and redo what Davies did. Even with Jack coming back, it's like, I'm just really, I guess, pessimistic as far as we're having all these callbacks, but I mean, they did bring back the silence in that technically, but I am just getting that vibe of everything that I feel is either new, is really just a Davies thing repainted.
There's an interesting thing. Like, you mentioned the silence. Like, I'd completely forgotten it was in this episode. I know, ironic. But it's like, that's literally it. Whittaker plays it for a joke. Chibnall writes a joke in the script. It's like, oh, I forgot you were here. It's his creations, and I get Moffat did this as well. His creations need to be treated with dignity, whereas the rest of it doesn't.
Yeah.
And that's ignoring the fact that the silence was shit after the Moon episodes.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. They're like, when it comes to like, say, the Pating or Ruth, he's like, he takes it very seriously. She regards
the Pating with more.
Yeah. And like Grace gets like a heavenly send. I don't know what that was about with Grace popping up out of nowhere, but like she gets a heavenly send off.
I literally had flashbacks to Clara.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're right.
Literally, in Clara's Capaldi's last episode, when Clara was superimposed onto a background, it's like the actor for Grace wasn't there.
Yeah.
She was like in a warehouse with green screen.
But even just the way they reacted to it, they're both like, yeah, we both just saw that. That was very poignant because Grace died. Remember? She died in episode 1. We mentioned it like once. We all cared for about 5 minutes, and then
she was a frog.
Story moved on. Like, I get it. Again, I feel like I'm being mean-spirited, but it's like, I get that the show often kills characters off and moves on, but just like you can't then like just bring it back up and be like, remember when that mattered that one time? Because it's overplayed, and yet you haven't shown much of it at all. That's what it's. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting then that these are the first companions since Martha to voluntarily leave the TARDIS.
Yeah. Which I appreciate, but at the same time feels like
I like that, but it's
too much room for them to just
only
come back.
Ryan made a decision though.
Yeah.
Like Ryan was the only one who wanted to leave. It's like if Ryan stayed, Graham would have stayed. If Graham didn't care about Ryan, Graham would have stayed. So it's like we can appreciate it that they made the brave decision to leave, but it's like, no, Ryan did.
Yeah.
Ryan made the decision, and Graham through a thinly veiled character across 2 seasons is just gonna follow Ryan.
Yeah. Which in itself, like, when I watched
it's sweet, I
there's
get
a thing on the ABC called The Whovians, where they talked about what they expected from each character, and they were basically the whole way through going, seems like Graham's gonna die at some point. Because they keep mentioning the cancer thing. So I think this is my conflict with the show, is that with Doctor Who, not Whovians, but when they make a big deal out of the cancer thing over and over again, and yet that's supposedly not the main conflict for Graham. Like, he already resolved the Ryan thing a season ago, so that's not it. But then the cancer thing got brought up again in the Can You Hear Me? And then he's like, oh, I'm just going to go now. And I'm like, I kind of did expect him to die. And then I feel like people are going to be like, well, just because he has cancer doesn't mean he has to die from cancer. Like, we don't have to see that. We don't want to see that. We're glad to have him just leave. It's fine. But that's exactly, it's just nothing. It's fine. But it doesn't say anything about his character other than he's supporting Ryan, which he did from the start. So,
yeah,
there's nothing accomplished. They just keep telling us things about characters that don't have any relevance. Like, Yaz is a policeman. The amount of times they've mentioned it, but is that her character?
Imagine if she was doing police work in this episode, though. Like, imagine if that was ever relevant.
Yeah. And it could have been really useful. I think that's the difference. I keep saying they haven't set anything up. And at the same time saying, they keep adding these they keep saying she's a policeman. That's the foundation. Work with that. But so I'm in this spot where there's too much of it and too little of it. Because it's the same promises over and over again with no progression or payoff. So you say Yaz is a policeman, but let's see her act like that. Let's see her give her policeman-based dilemmas. Give her conflict.
Yeah, this is the second episode where on Earth, in the modern day, she has been surrounded by people pointing guns, and she hasn't used the whole "I'm a police officer" thing against them to defuse the situation.
Oh, although I did just think she did do detective work by trying to figure out where the doctor was.
No.
So
yes, which went nowhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice moment of trait for a character, but again, I think this is why I come back to emotional stakes, or personal stakes, and dilemmas, because it really is like, if I was to explain why any other character does work, like Eccleston's dilemma was he just came out of the Time War, and he doesn't know how to connect again. He meets Rose, and there's all this, like, the first two episodes are him being like, I don't want a companion, and then him being like, I've shown you the end of the world so you can feel like me, you can understand how I feel. And Rose is like, what happened to your people? And he's like, I don't want to talk about it. This is who I am here and now, I don't want to talk about it. So, like, every episode is someone being like, I lost my home planet, or the Dalek being like, I'm alone, so are you. That dilemma is constantly bled upon. He is constantly stabbed with emotional stakes every episode.
Yeah, he only really wins once.
Yeah, everybody lives, Rose. That's why it matters. It's like, he finally found a solution to the dilemma, and we know it can't last. Like, that's what makes it beautiful and tragic. So then, even with, like, again, John Hurt's Doctor, the dilemma is, should I blow up Gallifrey all over again, or is there a way out? And if there's a way out, do I still have to live with the pain? It does seem like a bit of a cop-out resolution, but given that we dealt with that dilemma for that long, it was more the resolution to that dilemma, not the start of it. So with this, it's like, what is Yaz's dilemma? And that's where I was like, I like that conversation, because it gave me the impression of her dilemma is she has recognized that people who travel with the Doctor eventually get ditched. And it's not much, but that's something to me. Like, it comes out of nowhere, because we had 2 seasons of not that, but that's something. Although I suppose a lot of companions have already dealt with that. It's not new again, but something. Whereas, Ryan's dilemma was how to get along with his grandfather, and they resolved that in the first season. They didn't even progress it that much. They just didn't bring it up, and then they got along.
Is that really his dilemma? Is that he doesn't want to get along with Graham, and like he's resisting.
Well, that was my assumed dilemma. Like, that's why I liked the
'Cause, like-
first episode, because Grace died. He didn't get along with Graham, and then that to me that's the main point of conflict between them all. And then that's why I was like, well, that's why Yaz doesn't quite fit there, because she has nothing to do with that. But then
I think I would agree, but I don't know if that's how I would word it.
Sure, yeah.
Like there's a piece of that puzzle that I'm sure it's just the show never gave us that piece.
yeah, I'd say that's where they kind of hinted at it in the first episode, and I assume that's where it was going. But then you had plenty of episodes, like we had the Punjab thing, which was more about Yaz, and like when they Can You Hear Me finally brought Grace back, but that was the last episode before the finale, so that's not the time to start progressing on that. Like, it's almost like, if I assume that's the conflict, it's way too late, and if that's not the conflict, then what else was? And it's just that's where it was too. The best I can come up with was still super shallow. I don't know. And that's me also reaching for things. It's like, well, again, the episode of the resolution where Ryan meets his dad, and then he's like, oh, Graham's my real dad, kind of thing. That to me was the show attempting to resolve that, even though they hadn't really done anything with it until then. So,
would resolution have been worse off if Chibnall killed Ryan's dad?
Yeah, probably.
Really?
Yeah, because then it's like he's not choosing. It's just like well, you're the only default one I have left. So
I think it's a slightly more poignant message. If it's like, you left when you had this opportunity to be there, you come back and you still can't be there. Like I quite like that as a concept.
Sure, yeah. I just feel like also because Grace already just died, it's like.
Yeah, but it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna bring in this character who's not a character.
Yeah, I think, but that's the biggest part of all this, is that trying to fix resolution is trying to fix the payoff to a plot line that didn't really develop in the first place. Like, that's the thing, we've never met the father before, and we keep being told that Graham and Ryan don't get along,
remember,
and it's not. Yeah.
I remember it was very interesting on my watch through again. I like that he wasn't at the funeral, and I also like that in Arachnids, they discussed that. It's like, Graham hands Ryan a letter from his dad, and it's like, oh, I'm not gonna open that because he wasn't there.
Yeah.
So like the him not being there is more interesting than them having a healthy relationship, which is dark.
Yeah. And I forgot about that. Like, that's actually made me go, oh, maybe season 11 has more development on this than I remembered. But at the same time, it didn't.
Oh, it's not much.
Yeah, it didn't make any impact on me, clearly. But that's also the thing of 4 characters in the TARDIS. Like, I'm trying to find a loose plot line for 2 of the characters to have one dynamic when there are 4 characters who should be bouncing off each other constantly. Like any other, any group of 4, like Ninja Turtles, Seinfeld, Scooby-Doo, plus obviously
Buffy the
Scooby-Doo.
Vampire
Yeah. Like, they should be a set of 4 where you've got each character has 3 different relationships they can bounce off of. And you can have, like they did in this episode, one-on-one between 2 sets of characters. Here, though, in Revolution of the Daleks, they had 6 characters, and they had to cut out 2 of them and pretend they weren't there just to make that happen. So I don't know what this show's obsession is with throwing more characters in. Like, why does Oxygen have a whole cast of people when you've got 4 main characters?
I'm struggling to remember many characters from that episode.
Yeah, that's why, I reckon, because it's too cluttered. But I feel like it's not just that. Like we said with the Heaven Sent, like it's Capaldi on his own. But if it had been Capaldi on his own with a terrible script, it might not have worked as well. But the fact that that script had a very clear, like, poignant focus to it. It was about despair, and despair following the Doctor, and how the Doctor solves things and wins when all hope is lost. Like, that was a very good Doctor story. Whereas, like the specials with Tennant, what's the one where he's on the bus with that lady? And I'm like, I don't remember anything about it apart from there's a bus. And so I'm like, sometimes even when you only have two, the Doctor and a companion, it doesn't necessarily make it good. But I feel like when it's bad and you've already got 4 characters not contributing much, and then on top of that, you've got a group of people around the Doctor, like it's not like Midnight, where it's the Doctor versus a bunch of new people, and you've got time to flesh them out. It's just...
Jeez, there's another really good episode.
Yeah.
Chibnall, copy that, but remember to make it good.
Well, that's why I wonder, like, it'd be an advantage to just have the Doctor and Yaz. I don't know if it'll make it any better, but it'll certainly be less convoluted than all 4 of them.
Yeah.
But then bringing in this new guy debunks that completely.
Like, I'm not sure it'll help, but it's at least we're familiar.
Yeah.
Maybe that's really it. Maybe that's why I keep watching it, is because I sat through so much that it's just familiar.
Yeah, in a way I am starting to adjust to it more. Like, I'm like, yeah, it's still terrible, but yeah, I'm just used to these characters now. And not in a good way, like I really know them now, like I'm used to them in that I've really gotten to know their quirks. It's more like I know it's gonna be bad, so I can just shrug and wait it out. Yeah.
I'm just scrolling through the end of the episode now, because I've just been like holding down the right arrow, going like maybe an interesting bit will pop up. The Doctor ends it with Ryan and Graham by giving them psychic paper.
Oh, that's what that was.
Yeah. What do you mean that's what that was? They literally say it.
Did they? I thought they just went, oh, thanks.
Yeah, they say... Yeah, no. When they're up on the hill, they're like, psychic paper, that'll get us into all the places that mischief is happening.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I pretty much tuned out by that point.
Fair enough.
I was like, because that was the thing, I was like, I was perfectly fine with them just leaving. And then they had the bike thing, I was like, yep, sure, full circle. I don't think I liked it as much, because I was just like, oh, it's still going. And then they did the Grace thing, and then they're like, oh, there's some detective things, and I was like, that's, I think, the part where I was like, are you hinting that they're not quite done? Like, they wanted to retire and go home and stop, but then they're like, oh, it sounds like the Doctor might be in some trouble. We better go investigate. Like, I was very worried that was a hint at they're going to go investigate a new thing because they think it might be where the Doctor is, like they're trying to find her. And so I was just like, if this is, just resolve it already. Just like, it felt like 3 scenes of the same, yeah, we know they're leaving. Just go. They should have left the season ago. I'm just, yeah.
I hope we live in the universe where, because the show is very obsessed with, when their lead Doctor is leaving, they'll bring in all the old characters and we'll do like what is it called? It's like a memory lane.
Yeah.
Going like, oh, remember the good old times. I hope we live in the timeline where the actors for Ryan and Graham are both asked. I was like, hey, you want to come back? And they just say no. Like, there's something in that that's funny to me. Like, we'll go through, oh, remember the time John Bishop was here? Remember Yaz?
Yeah.
Fond memories. Oh, where's Ryan and Graham?
That is oddly, though.
We'll just
the weird thing about Capaldi's end and Smith's end was like we had Clara for one season. And he was like, Clara, I remember. And Amy. And he like, Clara's like, but I'm right here. Who are you talking to? He's like, Amy, my preferred companion. And then Capaldi was like, I brought back Clara. I attacked the Time Lords just to bring back Clara. But also Bill's here. Like, we had this thing of 2 seasons of people we got to know. And then 1 season of the new companion who came in for the last season of 3 seasons. And then the Doctor ended.
I think Bill is a better character than Clara, though.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
No challenge.
Because Bill had more personality and clarity in 1 season than Clara had in 3 seasons. Especially because Clara's character kept changing between the seasons.
Yeah. That's a shame. Like, it possibly sets a trend as like we shouldn't have ongoing companions, which I feel like is a given. But there's also a part of me that's like, if Clara was more consistent, I think I would have preferred to have her throughout all of Capaldi's run.
Yeah.
And just be this single thing.
Yeah. And would have bought it a little more in that, like, he's trying to save her. But it's like, then he'd be trying to save her not just because she's the companion at the time, but because we genuinely actually care about her. Like, to an extent, I'm not saying this would actually be the case, but if Tennant was trying to save Donna the same way, I think we might be a little more, save Donna. Like, don't, Yeah.
That's kind of a litmus test for, like, does this character work? As like, if they are tied to train tracks, do we want them saved?
Yeah. Although, like, there is the, was
Mr.
it Jamie
saved.
from the 5th Doctor's era, where no one cared about him up until he died, and then people were like, oh, man, what a death scene. Like,
I think he was, like, the first companion to die, though, on the adventures.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it was so interesting.
Yeah. So there's something to be said, like, if you can give us a really good moment, it will excuse a lot. But it's...
Yeah.
This show, currently, just hasn't really done that in any area. It kind of did for the Master. Like, I enjoyed the Master enough.
I did not.
Yeah, it's like...
It just makes no sense for Missy.
Yeah.
I care a lot about Missy. I think she's one of the best characters Modern Who has... or had, even though we only have, like, we don't have a lot to go off.
No, it's purely season
like,
10 for me. Like, that's on its own.
Yeah, so the fact that we get the Master going from season 10 Missy to this lunatic is like, I don't like this. And there's not anything interesting in the character now.
Which, again, if you consider it, the only reason he supposedly went back to evil, in my understanding of it, I agree with you that they didn't really bridge that, although I agree with what Moffat said about, like, we don't necessarily need to see. It would be nice to see, though, how the Master does. Especially because they made the point of saying,
the Master killed himself.
Well, in 10th season, they said, don't bother regenerating. So, like, Moffat put it in there that it was physically impossible to regenerate unless you broke some kind of rule or explained it. And then this one was like, he's just back. And I'm like, why is he back? Why is he evil again when we just, a season ago, saw him turn good? And then it's like, because the Time Lords are corrupt. Yeah, what else is new?
Okay.
Well, the Doctor is the key to regeneration. And that made him turn into John Sim again? Like, again, it does beg that question of, okay, you're just doing this because you want the Master back and you want him to be Davies' era. Like, it's... I'm not even saying, like, I have no genuine proof that they're trying to replicate the Davies era, but that was my assumption for why they hired Chibnall in the first place. Because of the other show he made, because Tennant was on it, I genuinely believe... I genuinely believe they just wanted someone to replicate that success.
Yeah, but I kind of wish they'd watched Broadchurch and discovered, oh, it's actually terrible.
See, I don't know if it gets better, but like, yeah, it did not grab me.
It does not. It, in fact, gets worse. Like, the longer it goes on, it just gets worse.
Yeah.
So enjoy the next 3 years of Chibnall. Or 3 seasons, whatever his plan is.
Yeah. It's an interesting position for the show to be in.
Yeah, interesting is definitely an adjective that can be used to describe this.
Because it's like, I guess it's more a question of why do we still try to invest in it?
Because we sat through season 9,
Yeah.
which is like,
Yeah, is it just a like we do as fans commit to like every season, even the good ones have had really, really awful episodes. But I think we have that syndrome of as long as we get one golden episode per season, and even then, like season 7 might have missed, or season 9 had the ridiculously terrible finale, but we still sit through that because of the golden episode, like because of Heaven Sent or Blink, like these top 10 episodes
Midnight.
make us bother with the rest of it.
Yeah.
But I feel like
it almost sounds like a hostage situation.
well, I feel especially in this sense, like or again like with Power Rangers, I know that it will change and evolve, and every season will pretty much do its own thing. So no matter how much I hate it, the next season could just be completely different, could just pick up again. Whereas this is more of the dead feeling of, well, Moffat is gone, and we had problems even when that was the case. So,
but we miss him.
Yeah, like what?
Slightly.
Yeah, what is it about this show, this series, that makes us think a Heaven Sent is even possible? Why do we wait it out like it is going to get better?
Because, well, I don't think this is a reason, but because there are ideas at play sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, I still like Demons of the Punjab. I still like Rosa Inner.
Yeah.
I still like It Takes You Away, and what's the other one? Can You Hear Me?
Yeah.
Those aren't good episodes.
Yeah.
But there is something.
Yeah.
Something there that if a writer was tasked with making something of it,
Yeah.
I'm sure it'd be special.
I think that is part of the like Doctor Who investment. Like we're just like, it's not great, but I agree with you. Like Can You Hear Me has an interesting concept that you like can go, yeah, it's Doctor Who, good enough. Like even like I was saying, even with this one, there is that sense of like, there's little things I liked. Yeah, hopefully we get more of that.
I can count them on one
Maybe.
hand.
The Jack and Yaz opening up to each other. Ryan not letting the Doctor just get away with stuff and challenging her on closing up. That's it.
Ryan, always love a good beanie.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing though, like I can poke holes at even the stuff I liked. It's like, yeah, she's like, oh, I remember when you wore that beanie in the first episode. I noticed that.
No, it's not
Did
the same beanie. It's just he wore a beanie.
Yeah. No one wears a beanie like you. That's a weird thing to say.
Yeah. Like that's probably the clearest ever example of Chibnall just putting on the handbrakes and going like, we need to stop this. How are we going to do this? Awkward dialogue.
Yeah. But again, I think I liked that Ryan was saying, like, because the Doctor's been closed up.
Yeah, Ryan was
seasons.
speaking the truth.
Was that?
Ryan was speaking the truth. He was like laying down.
Yeah.
Just saying things that need to be
He's
said
actually
to this
calling her out.
lunatic.
Yeah. Like, so I liked that. And I liked that Yaz had someone to emotionally open up to. that wasn't the other companions
Unfortunately,
who agree
it
with
wasn't the Doctor.
Yeah. But like, when it's all said and done, what that actually accomplishes in the grand scheme of things highly depends on what comes next. And
Yeah,
likely what comes next is going to be more Timeless Child. Whatever Chibnall thinks is a suitable replacement for what we already had.
I don't know. I don't think that's what's next. I think what's next is going to be an episode about fish.
About fish.
That's how we're going to get... Yeah, about fish. I don't know specifics, but fish are going to be involved somehow.
Okay.
With John Bishop's character. They're going to get involved in that. It's going to have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Maybe John Bishop is a fish. Maybe it's an existential crisis of identity.
Why a
Going
fish?
like, why not?
But like, no, if you genuinely just come up with this.
No, yes, I am literally just thinking on the spot, going like, what's something he would do? It's like, John Bishop's character, his brain is swapped with that of a fish, and he has to spend the episode as a talking fish. And the Doctor's like, wow, that's really weird. Is your name Jim? So what I'm saying is we're gonna get Jim the fish.
Okay. That's an interesting assumption.
Yeah, my brain is turning to mush at this point, because it's like, oh, there's just no hope.
Yeah. That's the thing. I guess as a fan, I actually
the core of it is there's going to be no Timeless Child stuff.
Yeah, which is
0.
I feel like is for me that's worse, but I understand that I'm not arguing that Timeless Child is better. It's just like you've made your bed, it's really poorly put together. So you either commit and we go, yep, it's as bad as I thought it was, or you don't, at which point I go, then that confirms it. The first 2 seasons are utterly useless. Because you mentioned this once in the first season, then you ended the second season with it as if it was set up. And then the third season, you dropped it and ignored it entirely. What was the point? Like, I don't necessarily want it to continue. I just don't want it to be dropped. Now they put any time into it.
What if, and this is not a good idea, but what if the next series is more like an anthology series? So obviously my ideal version of we're going to open up Doctor Who to explore different parts of the canon is you just get like the 10 Star Wars spin-offs.
Yeah.
But like, what if they just do like, each episode will follow a different thing. So like, this is the episode with the Roof Doctor.
Yeah. I would like to see
like, it doesn't
more
need to...
of the Ruth Doctor in theory. I think that's the trouble. I'm like, well, the Ruth part was decent and interesting, but the idea that we have to go... that I can't imagine a single explanation or situation that doesn't feel like a detour. Like, if they go through who each of these doctors were, that sounds like a great concept for, like, Big Finish, but not to just spin off a bunch of Doctor Who shows, where this show
that's
stalls.
kind of interesting. Like, I wonder what Big Finish is going to do with this.
Yeah. I would love to say, like, I'm happy that in that sense, it opens it up, because Big Finish can be like, oh, we can just tell stories about whatever made-up Doctor we want. Cool.
Well, no, they wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine one of the provisos is you cannot make up a Doctor, even if the show sets a precedent.
Oh, sure. That's weird. Oh, yeah,
because
because Big Finish and
show
Doctor
is
Who aren't fully connected. Like...
Yeah, the show is the canon.
Yeah.
Like, all this supplemental material, it's nice, but...
That's the challenge of it, though. Like, as a hypothetical side thing, Big Finish could do whatever they wanted, and I wouldn't mind. Whereas here, because there is a direct canon, I don't see how you introduce those new doctors who don't take up time, who aren't then inherently either filler or not fleshed out enough, because it'll just be, this is this doctor, and then there's this other, like, it'll be like episodic, like the Lilo and Stitch thing, where they go around meeting a different doctor each episode. And, like...
I remember the Lilo and Stitch show. That was good.
Yeah. But, like...
Yeah. I'm not expecting it to build to anything, is really it anymore.
Yeah. And then whatever it builds to, it's like, well, hang on a second. Why is this the new inherent backstory that every other Doctor is meant to have? Like, it can't just be a one-off arc. It is laying a new foundation, unless they don't touch it.
I think... Yeah, the only thing I would say is that Capaldi didn't mention the 50th until the Zygon episode.
Yeah.
And he used that for, like, emotional fuel for the fire in his...
Yeah, we didn't need that every episode. Like, that paid off fine.
No, I disagree, because the conclusion of Day of the Doctor is very clearly like, okay, that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna go looking for Gallifrey.
Oh yeah.
And then they just didn't do that.
Yeah, I do remember being disappointed by that.
So I was like,
I was more disappointed by that at the time.
There's pluses and minuses here.
Yeah.
Like, I would still be disappointed today because Series 8 isn't particularly good.
Yeah, I think that's half the thing though. Like, even the way Hellbent ended up, there is something to be said of like, well, once we got a Time Lord based episode, it wasn't great. So I'm now thinking like, yeah, it might have been a bad plan to have the whole journey revolve around that. But at the time, it's like, yeah, that did seem like that's where the show's overarching thing was going. And like I said,
even if it was only decided like 2 years prior.
Yeah, and like with the Tennant Eccleston thing, you didn't necessarily have to, like, they didn't resolve it till the 50th, but it kept coming up as a core thing for the Doctor to deal with. Whereas, now I don't see how you do that here, because it feels both derivative and too vague.
Yeah.
And it somehow has to fit in the Morbius Doctors, which in itself is a plot canon bender.
Yeah. Are you familiar with season 6B?
To an extent.
The fan theory that after Patrick Troughton was captured by the Time Lords, they have him go on a bunch of adventures.
Yeah.
Before he becomes Pertwee.
But he'd have to go on the exact amount that there were still 13 Doctors or 13 regenerations before Smith.
I don't know, because like if Chibnall was to, instead of saying this is pre-Patrick William Hartnell,
yeah,
but instead this is in that gap between Troughton and Pertwee.
Yeah.
Like I think people would be okay with that.
Yeah.
As like it's kind of war doctory of like like I don't like breaking the number rule.
Yeah.
Just completely, but it's like if we're going with the whole infinite regenerations, the Time Lords knew about it and they were controlling the Doctor in that span of time, I feel like I can forgive the Timeless Child stuff simply because it would only break the time of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, I can take it. That episode's not good.
But even then, you could say like between the second and third, you could say, well, there were exactly 13 regenerations, so the number did just reset around. Like if they, how many would it have to be? If it, yeah, so there were 13, but they gave them a new set somewhere in the middle of that. So you had Hartnell, Troughton, 11 other regenerations, and then reset the cycle, and then, or however many, and then 2 more for those 13 in between, and then it would continue on with the same number. But that's where it's messy.
Yeah, like I don't like that because it is pre-Hartnell that the number is so vague. But if it was injected there with the infinite things, it'd be like, yeah, fine, keep it vague.
Yeah.
Because then there's a point where you can go like, no, it was only 13, or it was only 26 or 39.
Oh, sure, yeah, 26 or 39. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's where the
It's
problem
still not
came
good.
up. That she didn't know what a sonic screwdriver was.
Didn't she?
Nah. That's where people were like, she has to be
right.
pre-Hartnell, but she has a TARDIS post-Hartnell. So this makes no sense.
I don't know. Is being a Time Lord and being the Doctor just like prerequisite to knowing what a sonic screwdriver
Well,
is?
it's like you could
like,
say because it was between Troughton and Pertwee, was that like you could say she's had a memory wiped. She's not. They would have taken the screwdriver away. But then Ruth refers to herself as the Doctor, so it's not like she doesn't know she's not the Doctor. I mean, in that episode specifically, we have the stopwatch thing just to do another reveal, like the Davies era. Like it's the same. Oh, look at Time Lord with the stopwatch thing. But again, that said, like I liked the reveal. It's just looking back at it wasn't that groundbreaking. I think it was more the case that she's like, I'm the Doctor, and you're like, what? How? But when you think about how, it's just less exciting. Because it's like, well, yeah, if she's still the Doctor, then she's working for that corporation, but there's nothing about that that's making her not the Doctor. It's like, well, they clearly she's keeping all her memories, or yeah, did they? It requires an explanation. Like you have to be like, she was the Doctor during that era, but then they wiped that whole thing because of something that happened near the end of it, or they were wiping a memory every single one because I think that Brenton thing got mentioned.
Yeah.
Like, but then was Brendan referring himself as the Doctor? Like, why is he called Brendan then?
Well,
like,
no, yeah, because he was Brendan.
Yeah.
So like Ruth is just an anachronism here. Then, the way I kind of see it is, it's very confusing that Ruth is a pre-Hartnell Doctor who escaped from the Division, which is the group.
Oh yeah, the Division.
Name.
Yeah.
So she's a fugitive who is on the run.
Yeah.
And yet somehow ends up back on Gallifrey as William Hartnell.
Yeah.
To steal a TARDIS? What?
Yeah.
Like it's weird, especially because now the Doctor's served part of that sentence. So it's like, how...
Is Ruth even a fugitive anymore?
Well, no, obviously she is, because the Doctor's broken out.
Oh, true, yeah.
Yeah. It's become very apparent they don't care which version of it serves the sentence.
Yeah, but which, like you said in itself, then why didn't they get any other Doctor to do that? And...
Because they didn't write it then.
And that's where, like, I'm happy when Doctor Who does the timey-wimey thing of, like, maybe for a short time, someone did some time traveling and accidentally rewrote the Doctor's history, and so she has to go figure out how that happened and then rewrite it back. Like, you can write in a thing and be like, well, this is only temporary because, but it's like, what's really the point?
Yeah. That's really the capstone for all of this. What was the point?
Yeah. That's what I think I meant by it's a placeholder. Like, there's a lot here that's trying to break or change canon. It's not playing safe, but placeholder in the sense that nothing really matters. It just feels like they're throwing whatever they can at the wall until someone with an actual idea comes along and picks the show back up. Like its only objective at this point is to keep the show running. It doesn't matter what canon they break. It doesn't matter what plot point they add in. It doesn't matter if any of it makes sense. As long as they make an episode and put it on TV, it counts. It's like Amazing Spider-Man being made purely to keep it running.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the sense I get. It's like Chibnall literally wrote the script and went, here you go, there's something. As long as my show stays on air. And BBC's like, yep, we're going to keep it on air as long as you're willing to put content up. We don't care how low the ratings get. Doesn't matter. Nothing matters anymore.
See, that's kind of weird though, because the BBC is paid by the taxpayer in the UK. So it's like, if ratings got so bad, that's just indicative that the people paying for it don't want it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it cannot go on forever. There will be a time when we get to like below 1 million viewers.
Yeah, that's true. I think they'll cancel it then, but yeah.
No, I don't think they will. But I like your version of that because it gives me hope.
Yeah.
What a sad state it is that I'm a fan of this thing and I want it to end.
Yeah. And that's where like Council of Geeks made a episode about the whole like gatekeeping and when people want a show to be cancelled and how that's not like I'm probably paraphrasing one up, but like how that's not fair to the people who still want it to continue. Like, you should always want a show to get better. It shouldn't be advocating for it to end. But I guess I've always disagreed with that only in the sense that like I agree with them in that like we shouldn't all be sitting here like we want to hate it, we want it to end, we want to kill it, we want to ruin it. But it is the sense of like we don't want it to get so bad that it can't possibly get new viewers. Of course we want people to see it, but we don't want people to see it when it's bad, get the wrong impression, walk away saying Doctor Who's terrible and dumb, and then it be cancelled, and when we're like, it was great, you know, when it comes back on, please come watch it. And people are like, no, Doctor, like, when it got cancelled, that was the time when people were mocking it more than ever. People were making fun of how Daleks couldn't climb stairs and whatnot. Like, it was probably joked about before that, but there's just this sense of like if something gets like Star Wars is a good example. Star Wars now has such a bad reputation, both from a audience perspective and a Lucasfilm perspective, that it's at the point where if you try to introduce people to Star Wars, they're gonna go, oh, but that's that thing with the toxic fan base and the, you know, Disney sequels and the like. It now looks so bad from the outside that people do not want to give it a chance. Except for like Mandalorian, of course, but like yeah,
that depresses me.
But that's what I worry about. It's like I get that like sometimes we get too passionate, and when people do like stuff we don't like, and we're like, oh, but how can you like that? It's so clearly bad. That's pushing people away who do like the show. But I think the concern is always that it might be a form of gatekeeping, but it's people like the parts of the show that aren't really the show. It's like you've watched like you've watched one season of the latest thing, and you've gone, oh, the Doctor is quirky, and you know the timeless child thing. I can't wait to see where that goes. And we're like, you don't get this a 50-year history show with Time Lords and Sonic Screwdriver and what. So like when they changed the Sonic Screwdriver to the glasses, I was only slightly annoyed, but I get why some people were really mad and some people weren't. But I'm like, I didn't love it. I didn't hate it as much as other people did.
Yeah, but it's just the old thing reskinned.
Yeah, and that's
like,
why I get the people who did hate it. Well, like, it's part of the iconography of it. Like, you can change the Daleks a little bit, but don't make them the Power Ranger Daleks and then show them off like this is the way it's always been. Like, there is an element of, please don't change it to the point where new fans either don't recognize it or like it for things it can't maintain. Like, there is the argument to be had that people didn't know about the classic era. So we got into it when all the Doctors were young. And then when Capaldi was older, some fans just dropped off. Like, it's you're not representing the show accurately to an extent.
I don't. It's one of those weird middle grounds of like, fans didn't like the new Daleks in season 5.
Yeah.
And the production team clearly listened to that,
Yeah.
because we never see them again.
Yeah.
So there is a sense of like, if fans can say something, the creatives are willing to listen usually.
Yeah.
Where am I even going with this point? It's like it's useless taking into account what fans want when you're producing something that is trying to appeal to people who just don't care about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the...
That's word soup.
I get what you mean. Like with the Disney trilogy, where you could feel that they were like, we want new fans. I'm like, yeah, of course we want new fans. It's not that we're like, we want it to be... I'm sure there are some people out there who just want it to be the original trilogy and like, don't go outside of that. But it's like, there are people who are like, the prequels aren't great, but people are starting to defend them. It's like, and we might have done the same with the Disney trilogy, but they were so busy being like, no, our idea's great. We don't care what 40 years of fans think. And they're all toxic anyway. And it just devolved it to the point where the people who did care, like passionately cared, were ignored. And then the people who, like, were casual, and there's nothing wrong with being the casual fan, but it's annoying when the casual fans are passionate about the small snippet they've seen. And the show runs purely on that. And then, yeah, it becomes, those fans then go, yeah, I liked it enough that I moved on. And all the passionate fans are like, well, you've ignored us, so we're gone. And you end up with the situation we're in. Yeah.
Yeah, so people are dumb.
Well, I think it does depend on the feedback as well. Like, this is where it is. They regard the passionate people who are like, we don't like the Holden maneuver, we don't like this little, the way the ship works and whatnot. So then Rise of Skywalker came across almost like it was trying to correct all the little nitpicks we had, but not the plot cohesion. Like, it was all like, wayfinders and hand-wavy dialogue and whatnot, but not, people said, oh, we didn't like that Rey was a nobody. Fair enough, but it's not necessarily whether we like that or not. It's, you then had to sell it to us better, not just rewrite the whole thing and give Chewie a medal. Like, there are certain criticisms that are worth taking, and there are some that are just fans being like nitpicky, and it's like, we enjoy being nitpicky, but I think that's where Disney listened to all the little things, like Chewie never got a medal, or
I don't know anyone who was talking about that in 2019.
Oh no, it was ages ago, but like,
yeah, but like, I don't think, like, I don't understand
yeah,
how anyone could have looked at any set of data and extrapolated, that is what we need to put in our movie.
I genuinely feel with Rise of Skywalker that they had a checklist of things they thought viewers might complain about, and then checked them off, just thinking, we've seen Rey train, we've seen Chewie get a medal, we've seen, we've mentioned the Holden maneuver. Like, they literally just checked off things they thought might be an issue, without considering what the actual movie was trying to do. But yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like, I understand why with 40 years or 50 years of history, it is easy for certain fandoms to be like, we know what works, or we know what we want, and to be really loud about it and make it really hard for studios to understand what they're actually meant to do, or like what we genuinely want and what we're just complaining about. But I think, especially with like looking at Chibnall's era, it's like they, what was it? They took on board something. Oh, they're like, when Jack came back with the Ruth thing, people were like, yeah, we want more Jack. So they gave us more Jack. But when it came to like anything else,
smaller things like good writing.
Yeah.
Like, we complain about these are structural things. Like,
Yeah.
It's the difference of structure versus superficial.
Yeah. And they listen when it's the superficial stuff.
Yeah,
like, oh, you want more Jack? We can put more Jack in.
Yeah, we can give you that fix.
Yeah.
This is a fix that only this show can give. Only this show can give you Captain Jack Harkness.
Yeah.
But any show can give you good writing. So if you really want good writing, piss off. Go and watch Firefly.
That'd be interesting if you went to a writer's door and it just had on the door, if you want good writing, go elsewhere.
I think I would just be very depressed at our craft.
There is like I forget what the actual quote is, but when I did the sitcom course, the comedy course, they mentioned that some director had on his wall, make me cry, make me smile, make me mad, make me come, or something like that. And the idea was like,
yeah, I was
at least in a sitcom, you usually want that's why you'll find like every sitcom has a sexual kind of joke, a characters being mean to each other, a really, really sad moment where everyone's somber. Like, that's why in every sitcom you hear that mention of that one episode that was really dark and depressing and serious. Like, they intentionally do that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was actually true, but I've always like thought of that as like, that should be your main goal, to give your audience some kind of emotional experience. And it does just feel like we said, they give us the superficial stuff, but as soon as we're like, but what are we meant to care about? They're like, oh, well, we got the Masters back. You're like, well, yeah, but what are we meant to care about?
I'm sad that he's back.
Yeah, it's like, no, but that's the thing. I enjoy him as far as light entertainment goes. But I do feel like that's why it's hard, because it's like we're trying to critique almost how to fix this. And it's just like, they just need to care.
Yeah.
It just feels like they're giving us the stuff, again, the shower thing, like you said, it's the stuff only this show can offer. Again, it's a checklist of what do they like? What's popular about Doctor Who? The Master, which is ironic, because again, Series 11 was none of that. So I don't know if they did Series 11, realized it didn't work, and fell back on it. Or that was their intention the whole time.
Well, it feeds into my theory that they really hate Heaven Sent.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're going to bring the Absorbaloff back.
That would be interesting. That would confirm my theory they're doing Davy's stuff without thinking about
it. I don't think that's it. I think that would be... what if they have Mr. Big be absorbed by the Absorbaloff? But then his personality fuses?
I don't know how I'd feel about that, because I'd be like, that's so weird. And yet, with what we've got so far, why not?
Like, I feel like I would happily say Love and Monsters is a better episode than anything Chibnall has provided us.
See, I don't know if I'd agree with you on, like, anything he's provided, but I'm now thinking about it. I'm like...
Of these last two seasons, I think Love and Monsters is a better episode than any episode we've gotten.
I feel like I kind of agree, but I feel like only because we've adjusted to Love and Monsters over the years. I'm like, if it came out this season, I'd just be like, it's still the worst. But it would be better fit during this. Like, I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense, because most stuff here is terrible.
I don't think I would agree. I don't think it fits anywhere. which is why I love it.
Sure, yeah, but I feel like this is the prequel thing. Like, when they came out and everyone was like, it has a lot of problems, and then we hated it because it has a lot of problems. But then over time, we just went, yeah, it has a lot of problems, but this is what we got, so we got to make our peace with it. And then slowly but surely found ways to make our peace with it. Like, it's not...
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I don't think he would remember this exchange, but because I didn't watch Doctor Who as it came out up until like some of Matt Smith's stuff, I hadn't seen Love and Monsters until, God, I think it was around the time Capaldi was cast.
All right.
So it's like I was on Skype with a friend just messaging being like, oh, Love and Monsters, that was all right, and just getting walls of text going like, no, this is terrible. And I was like, that was fun. I was like, I've been in that camp for a long time, thinking, yeah, it's all right.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I feel like that's also the vibe I get from some of this, where like...
Yeah, but it's not though.
Yeah, no, but it's I don't know, it's like...
Love and Monsters comes from a place of love.
I guess, I'm sitting in a weird spot where I'm like, I enjoyed this episode enough, the Revolution of the Daleks. I enjoyed it enough. Probably more so because it has no internal logic. Like, the more it felt, the more I was just like, it allows me to not be mad. So, like, I think that's the thing though, like, if you package an entire 2 seasons together, and then be like, is it better than one bad episode? I'd be like, on the one hand, I feel like a lot of stuff in Davies, I agree with you in the sense that almost everything in the Davies era, even if I hated it, like I really didn't like the Slovene, but I'm like, if I put it up against any Chibnall monster, I'm like, I like the Slovene better.
Yeah.
But, like, that's the thing, I think because we bubble it together, I'm like, it's hard for me to judge anything now in the Davies era that doesn't just make me go, it's part of the Davies era, it's fine. Like, it's either good or fine. Even the bad stuff just kind of goes, yeah, but it's in Davies era, and most of that completely excuses it.
Yes, but what would you prefer? Would you prefer the last 2 seasons of Doctor Who, or the implication that a man is having sex with a slab of concrete?
I know, I'd prefer the last 2 seasons, but like... only because, that slab thing is like...
You and I are living on different planets, mate.
Well, I guess then we're not entirely on the same page.
And that is the end of the podcast.